something like 1,000 terawatt hours. You can see the scale of required is huge, perhaps unmanaged. And it is in that context that process can be important. So then if electricity share to around 40%, hydrogen share 50%. And then of course the biofuels and the thermal heat is low temperature. But you can leverage biomass agricultural and all the risks coming from electricity.
So, sir, sorry. Yeah, no, just I want to, I'm a layman and a lot of people in the audience are not exactly technical. Could you just explain this process and how much cheaper is it than what is being talked about in terms of green hydrogen and the multi-billion-dollar investments that are being talked about? How much cheaper will hydrogen be?
It should be accordingly significantly cheaper. I don't have a number as cost, because this process is under evolution. The electrolysis of water is also a process that come on the just here. Now, simultaneously there is development of thermochemicals of water. In fact, at Bath, there is a plant which is continuously running, though at very low capacity, 100 liters per hour. But it's a metallic engineered plant, can certainly be scaled up, of course, confident. But because, the cost of hydrogen is the cost of energy, and because you are doing it directly, you are very efficient on energy. Got it?
Use a mic, please. Mic for the gentleman. Thank you.
For high temperature separation of the water, what temperatures are you conceiving in your mind, and how do we achieve those temperatures?
Well, these temperatures are of the order of, if you use iodine sulfur, of the order of 800 degrees Celsius.
Oh, okay.
If you are talking about copper chlorine process, it's of the order of 500, 600 degrees Celsius.
Oh, not much.
But both the processes are on the pilot plant scale, they are in operation. It's a doable thing, but somebody has to take it forward as an engineering and commercial proposal.
On a pilot plant, what are the costs like? Can you give us an idea?
Well, I would like to quote those numbers. Costs, they are ridiculously low. But, pilot plant does not reveal the total cost. I think I am only pointing out a fundamental fact that instead of two-step energy conversion, if you have a single-step energy consumption, the energy consumption has to be necessarily low. And in terms of cost of hydrogen, it is primarily the cost of energy. So it has to be fundamental. Well, the fundamental fact is that it will be a much cheaper proposition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so can I move forward?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So now, I just want you to fix this notion of scale in your mind from, from the current 1,600 terawatt hours per year total electricity system in the country. You have to take it to something like 14,000 terawatt hours per year if the hydrogen is produced through thermochemical route, or even 25,000 terawatt hours per year if hydrogen is also produced through electricity. So you can imagine the scale up that is required to be done. And as I mentioned to you, the renewable energy potential is, it will be just adequate to meet the current energy requirements. And all these 4 times larger energy requirements are not possible unless you have large scale recourse to nuclear. And that's the point which I would certainly like all the audience to sort of take note of. Now, now to meet the hydrogen and electricity requirements, this is absolutely important. On one side, as I mentioned, to meet the net zero target, for which the date is 2070. But for industries which are hard to abate, if carbon footprint in their product is large, many of you might have heard the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is taking shape in European Union. And that would mean that if your carbon footprint of your product is beyond a particular threshold, there will be an additional tax. If you are exporting your product to European Union, you may have to pay that tax, and it may be quite large, maybe of the order of 15-20% or a little more. And that would make our export completely uncompetitive. And so it's very important that this aspect of decarbonizing industry is done almost on an immediate basis, both in terms of their electricity requirements and also in terms of, if they are using carbon or oil or something, that should be replaced by hydrogen. And so there is a major transition, not only in electricity system by way of augmentation of nuclear energy, but also in the larger industry where electricity system and also the hydrogen supplies would become very, very important. So the challenge is now, how do we do this? Today we are at such a low threshold. So how do we get this done? And so today the only vehicle which is supplying nuclear electricity is Nuclear Power Corporation of India. So we do need a major policy thrust, management thrust, governance framework for a very rapid and large scale deployment of nuclear energy. And this is where I think one must expect a large-scale transformation, multiple vehicles for program implementation on a large scale. Now, currently, NPCIL is delivering, the current NPCIL generation is at around 7,500 megawatts. And there are another 6,000 megawatts under construction, and then another 9,000 megawatts which have been sanctioned. But a good number among them are the so-called fleet mode construction for the 700 megawatt reactor. And then, of course, we expect another 32,000 megawatts to come by way of the international agreements that we have already made. For example, with United States, with France, they don't seem to be moving very fast, except the agreement with Russia, which of course Kudankulam reactors 2 are operating, 2 are advanced stage of construction, and 2 more have been taken up. So there are total 6,000 megawatt units under construction there.
So I have.
But it can be done in the sense. I'll just come to you. Let me finish this sentence. In France, they added 63 gigawatts in a period of 21 years, 1979 to 2000. And in China, they added roughly 43 gigawatts in a matter of 17 years, 2002 to 2012. So this actually is doable provided we put our act together. Yes, please, you had a question.
Yes, please. The question is, why is it that we are not scaling up our nuclear power capacity much faster than it is being done, as you rightly said just now? Because I do remember in 2009-10, a target was fixed of 20,000 megawatts by our former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. And then subsequently there was also discussion to increase it to 50,000 megawatts. Now that we have a huge renewable energy target, which we are trying to achieve through 6-hour solar power project, and which we are trying to supplement by way of having storage, which is extremely expensive at the moment, and otherwise pump storage, which is going to have long gestation period. I see no reason why we can't go up to 50 gigawatts or 100 gigawatts as a country. What are the constraints now? Because I was told the constraints were two. One, we didn't have enough money being generated by Nuclear Power Corporation at that time in 2009-10. And the second thing I was told was that we had a problem with manufacturing capacity within the country.
I think both of them are not true. The Nuclear Power Corporation, it is generating electricity at a competitive tariff. Now, this is the real problem here is a perception problem. For example, renewable energy tariff, as was clear from the bidding processes that took place, that really was the generation tariff at the plant. Now, that number is okay as far as the decentralized use of renewable energy is concerned. Renewable energy is a variable, it's not available 24/7, it's not a base load energy. And if you want to integrate this variable generator into the grid, you have to incur a lot of costs. Actually, the storage cost which you mentioned is only just one cost. There are other costs because of the profile of generation, supply side, and also profile of the demand side. You have to make sure that you have enough capacity in the grid at all points of time to meet the demand. And that would mean you have to invest much more on the capacity. The peak to average, if you have all generating plants or baseload generating plants, then peak to the average, that ratio is something. But if you have a lot of variable capacity in the grid, variable generation capacity in the grid, then that peak to average, that number will go up. And that would mean that you have to invest much more in the capacity than you do. And that is something which people, not that it was not known, but the perceptionally people always felt that solar energy is available only at 2 rupees, 2.5 rupees and all. It's only now when there are some bids where they said that we want with some 6 hours storage or 8 hours storage, then the tariff for renewable energy is kind of showing up a much higher number. So you leave that aside, but coming to nuclear tariff has been always competitive all the time, and Nuclear Power Corporation has been a AAA rated profitable organization all the time.
Is it correct that we have a serious question of availability of the sufficient fuel to increase the nuclear capacity in our country?
That was true before the opening up of civil nuclear power, not any longer. So the point is, these are perceptional problems. But one perception was that renewable energy can address the entire clean energy requirement. That is partial truth, in the sense it can address the current requirements, but it can't address the requirement of developed country like developed India, as I mentioned earlier. Other thing is renewable energy is cheap. I will go to another, jump a slide and show you. For example, if you see this slide, this is what I was mentioning. This is a 3-axis plot. The vertical axis is the electricity price. This is the US calculation done by MIT people. And on the two horizontal axes, one axis is the carbon emission. So if you go along the origin, you are reaching the net zero. If you are away from it, then you have higher fraction of carbon emission. The other horizontal axis is the mix between nuclear and variable renewable energy. And if you notice that if you have all variable renewable energy and if you go to the zero carbon emission, you are going into a hill, peak region. That's where the tariff peaks up, and that's what I mentioned. This is actually a result of a calculation done by MIT, which is also there, by the way, in a number of international reports. And similar calculations have been done by our IIT Bombay, and there also it shows up that there is that tariff jump. So I think we need to recognize these facts. So the other perceptional issue which you're missing is, the question is, people have not recognized, I'm sure even today people are not recognized that without nuclear, India's development story can never become. So this question which you asked, I think it's a question you should pose to policymakers. I am no longer in that group, so I cannot address that question. But what I am telling you is the facts as I see them. And so the solution also is written here, in the sense just one nuclear power corporation is not going to be enough. You need a number of PSUs because Atomic Energy Act requires it to be so. Or you could have joint ventures between PSUs to mobilize their resources and also their implementing capability. And in addition to that, you could have joint ventures between PSUs and private sector, because up to in a minority role they can always participate. Now, in addition to that, multiple implementing vehicles for large scale capacity, I think we must also cater to the need for dedicated clean power, particularly for hard to abate industries. In the context of the carbon border adjustment mechanism which I mentioned earlier. And the whole world is again another perceptional problem. Everybody is talking about it. There is no commercial demonstrated SMR today anywhere in the world, although there are 70-80 designs around. India's 220 megawatt PHWR is the smallest commercial reactor worldwide. And it has been performing with global kind of benchmarks. It has achieved it has established a record for the longest uninterrupted continuous run of something like 960 days at Kaiga 1 unit. And more than 1 year or longest uninterrupted continuous, they have done it for more than 40 times so far, different reactors of NPCIL. So it's a proven reactor. The capital cost of this reactor is just half of any SMR that you may talk from anywhere. And the Indian industry is fully, they have been making, we have dozens of plants operating. Indian industry can deliver. The other point which you mentioned about industry capacity not being adequate, I would just like to put it to you that if the program is going on well, I think industry capacity can be built in a time scale of 1.5 years or 2 years at the most. So industry capacity can in fact be ramped up quite fast. And of course, even now they are building, I think NPCIL itself is building 9 reactors simultaneously, and they are getting geared up for the fleet mode construction. So I think ramping up industry capacity is not something very difficult. It will happen on its own, provided everybody, the country at large, the industry, the investors, they see the program going forward in a rapid way. And I think it is sometimes, there is a perception problem on part of people. There is also a perception problem on part of policymakers, and also, I dare say, perception problem on part of investors. So that the answer to your question lies in actually that.
Okay, sir.
Let me add one.
Yeah, please. Please add. Then I have to ask you a supplementary. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the point is, we should focus on electricity. That is the capacity of our grids. We should focus on dedicated energy to our hard-to-abate industry, and this should be both in the form of electricity, but as well as captive hydrogen supplies. And to begin with, although I am a champion of direct splitting for hydrogen, but to begin with, it has to be necessarily in the form of electrolyzers, because commercially that is available in the nearer time frame.
Yeah.
Now, and then the same 220 megawatt plant can be progressively kind of modified. And you can have a Fleet 1 or Mark 1, which is almost similar to what you have now. You can have a Mark 2 where there is a higher degree of modularization, a higher degree of factory content, factory manufacture content in that. And because this requirement, I am told, is quite large, even for these dedicated plants, industry-wide this requirement may well exceed something like 40-50 gigawatts. So we are talking about a very large number of units, and we can take it to the modularization progressively. But since this number is large, it makes sense to create an India model for a typical SMR, the PWR type of SMR. And those could be very well fitted in at the sites, brownfield sites vacated by retiring coal plants. Because they have to be transported in those regions, and also rail transportable factory assembled units would be very handy. And I think NTPC along with BARC is working on such a proposition. And then going forward, today of course, as I did say that we have access to uranium, so that constraint is not there. But the fact is, we are talking about a large Indian program, and so I think it makes sense to make it fed more by the Indian origin fuel than the imported fuel, because there could be vulnerabilities setting in the future. And so we should talk about thorium, and a design of thorium fuel, thorium high assay, low enriched uranium fuel is also now ready. And one could think of thorium halo fueled PHWRs. At least, see, whatever I'm talking for India, I think the same story is there for several emerging economic countries. And that is where the real global growth will be there. Growth is not going to be in the West, which are already, they have reached saturation in terms of their energy supply. So they will require new plants only to cater to retiring plants. Whereas the emerging economic countries, where there will be larger energy requirement, they will require this additional capacity. And I think there is tremendous opportunity for India to get into export. So I think we can think of a large scale revamping of this whole industrial commercial activity on nuclear energy to meet our needs.
Have we one question?
Yeah. Just one sec, please. Please wait.
Yeah.
Sir, my question is not answered. The fact that the small SMR you mentioned, which one is that? How much capacity was it running continuously for 900 days? You mentioned one, no?
220 megawatt.
Where kutte hai, sir?
Kaiga unit 1.
Kaiga 1. Now, sir, is it using our fuel, the thorium-based fuel, or is it using the
No, it is using natural uranium, just like any other pollution.
Okay. So when we say we want uranium, we are talking about importing that uranium?
Yes, because we have our uranium which we should use to the maximum extent, but that is not going to be sufficient. So we should, and we have access to imported uranium.
Yes. Now the question.
I'm only talking about potential vulnerabilities in the supply chain.
Yes.
Supply.
Yeah.
So in that context, we should move to thorium.
I agree, sir. So now the question is, our supercritical fast breeder reactor of 500 megawatts, it has generated enough fuel for us to set up a plant using thorium?
No. Supercritical fast, not supercritical.
Sorry,
but
fast breeder.
Fast breeder reactor.
Yes.
That reactor that technology is under development. The first reactor is under commissioning. It's delayed a lot, and but from what I have seen latest, I think that all their problems are behind them, and this year that reactor should go on stream, the 500 megawatt.
Okay.
And then of course more could follow. So it will take time for it to breed more fuel, but that's a philosophy that should continue, the three-stage philosophy.
Yes.
For growth of nuclear. That of course should continue, because that also takes you to thorium. All I'm saying is, because we have access to imported uranium, so you can actually advance deployment of thorium through the route I mentioned.
So our heavy water reactors are now running on imported fuel or natural uranium, correct?
Not all of them, but a good number of them are running on imported.
Last question from my side at the moment, sir, is what is the cost, you think, of these new plants that we are planning, the small ones, the 700 megawatts and also the 220 in modular form, SMRs, if you can call them that?
When the fleet mode construction, the government had approved 10 units of 700 megawatt. That outlay is roughly, I think, 1 lakh crore. So 1 lakh crore for 7,000 megawatts will come to something like 15 crore per megawatt. And that of course, that sanction was some years earlier. So if you make inflation correction and all, today it might be around 20 crores per megawatt.
And the SMRs that you gave us example of, what would that cost?
SMR, the indigenous SMR would be comparable. If you import SMR, I think today SMRs are being quoted at around 60 to 80 crores per
megawatt. That's true. Fine, sir. Thank you.
One question. Since the experimentation with the thorium-based reactor is going on, when do you think this can be developed on a commercial basis to be adopted on other units?
The thorium HALEU can be, there is right now the fuel qualification work in test reactors is on, and some more work is required, so maybe around 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
Shall I go ahead?
And we have enough thorium available in our country. Is it correct?
Yeah. India is endowed with the largest thorium deposits in the world.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
So now, to go forward, now, if nuclear is the mainstay in future for a country like India, I think we also need to have a number of products, number of new power systems to meet various requirements. And this slide here actually lists those power systems. Some of them I have already mentioned. For example, the SMR modules for setting up at retiring coal plant sites, which I already mentioned. One could also think of, for example, we had carried out a design and development of advanced heavy water reactor, 300 megawatt unit, and those are the units which could be aimed at. And there is there are much higher degree of freedom one will get in terms of their siting. Then we're talking about fast breeder reactor. So the 500 megawatt fast breeder reactor, I expect would be commissioned this year. Now, I think there is a plan to build two more at the same site so that you have a full complex of reactors and reprocessing plant there. But based on that experience, we should graduate it further to metallic fuel fast reactors. The current ones they are oxide fuel, and while oxide fuel would carry out breeding of fissile material, which is the objective of setting up fast reactors, their breeding ratios are not as attractive as they would be in case of metallic fuels. And so, of course, initially the important thing is to set up fast reactor capacity, and the capacity growth will be determined on the supply of plutonium. So that there is no constraint now because we have a fairly large thermal reactor capacity. But going forward, in order to have faster doubling of the capacity, we should graduate to metallic fuel fast reactors for the rapid second stage capacity growth. And an additional advantage of that would be that, when the waste is an important problem, particularly the long-lived waste is a challenge for nuclear energy. Most of the countries, including advanced countries like United States, have not solved this problem. And so they are only keeping waste as, to get the spent fuel out of reactor, declare it as waste, put it to repositories, which they have not been able to do because Yucca Mountain they couldn't do. And so all the utilities are being paid compensation for storing spent fuel at their own sites all over. Now, India has wisely and rightly adopted a policy of closed fuel cycle, primarily because without that we can't go to thorium. But that means we can reprocess, and if we can reprocess, we can recycle plutonium, we can recycle uranium, and with metallic fuel fast reactors, you can recycle even actinides. So actually you reduce the problem of long-lived waste from, talking about something like 1,000 years or 10,000 years to, we are talking about something like, say, 200 years or 300 years. So you are literally eliminating, and the repository requirements come down drastically. So that's the importance of fast reactors. I was talking about hydrogen production, and you want to produce hydrogen production through direct route, then you require that temperature. So you require a high temperature reactor. The current reactors, the maximum temperature would be, say, 300 degrees Celsius or 280 degrees Celsius in water reactors, and maybe around 500 degrees Celsius in fast reactors. So you need the high temperature reactors to be developed. Some work is going on at BAR, needs to be accelerated. And then of course you must develop the reactor for the third stage, which is the molten salt reactor. And then there is also, I already talked about thorium, HALEU. But then I think we must also keep our eye on fusion reactors for the future. And I'm sure another 10-15 years, one would be talking about fusion reactors on a large scale. So that's a development that we should be always talking about. And of course, with respect to the economic competitiveness of the, we already discussed and I had talked about this slide already. So let me close the presentation by some closing remarks. So the first one is to recognize that decarbonization is unavoidable to sustain our very existence. That I think there is universal acceptance. Renewable energy alone cannot support India becoming a developed country. That's the point I made right in the beginning. Nuclear is the only clean baseload energy option available and facilitates a cheaper integration of variable renewable renewable energy, which I mentioned, including that last figure. And so nuclear energy is capable of supporting India's development aspiration. However, development would be capped at a level determined by its actual deployment. So tomorrow, if you say that, I talked about this number, we're talking about a couple of thousand gigawatts of nuclear capacity, which I don't know how it will be realized the way we are doing things. So supposing it goes to, say, 100 gigawatt nuclear energy, then you would mean that much total energy available, and I think that is the Human Development Index where we would be capped, our development would be capped. If you go to 500 gigawatts, better, 1000 gigawatts, even better. So sooner we scale up nuclear deployment, the better. And that's the message I want to leave with all of you. Thank you very much.
When
I'll be happy to answer any more questions if there are.
when are we starting or having a plan to start work on the fusion? Because China has already gone ahead and one more country has gone ahead on that.
Well, those are all development reactors or development. None of them is producing electricity. The most advanced project for production of electricity is at ITER. It's an international thermonuclear experimental reactor, and it's a global international cooperation. India is a member there. So we are also a party. You must have heard the news of the largest cryostat in the world was supplied for this reactor. It was made by Lasset Tomorrow in India. And so we'll have access to this, but it's going to take some time for this to show net fusion energy release, and after that an electricity production. So I think electricity from fusion, if not anything, is at least I would say 30-40 years.
Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. It's been so nice listening to you. I think next time we need to have a full day with you. That is the only way we'll get all our questions answered. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Round of applause for Mr. Kakotkar. Thank you, sir.
So I'll remove my presentation.
Yes, please, you can. And if you'd like to hang around and see what my friend Srikanth is saying, you are welcome.
No, I would have liked to, but I have another commitment too.
Right, sir. Go right ahead, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye. Bye. Mr. Srikanth, over to you. Mr. Srikanth, there's one good news and one not so good news. The good news is that you're going to be speaking now. The not so good news is we don't have too much time. So please keep it short. Maybe 20 minutes max. Thanks. May I call upon Mr. Kiran Dikshit to join us as well?
Hello. Okay. So first of all, I thank Harry for inviting me here, and I think I'm very delighted to be actually presenting at this EPI conference, because I see a lot of stalwarts here and a lot of people who actually are quite influential today, though they may have retired from their roles now. So I think what I would actually like to do is basically, this is the research that we have been doing for about 4 years at NIAS, and what I'm very happy to say is that we have identified sites in thermal power plants for actually installing 40 gigawatt capacity of small modular reactors in the next 15-20 years. The advantage of this, so that is the whole purpose of this talk. What we identified right at the beginning is one point why our nuclear program is not growing at the rate at which it should grow. Dr. Kakotkar pointed one point about perception. And I think that is a very, very, very real problem. And I think DIE is partly responsible for that lack of perception, positive perception in the people at large, in policymakers, of course, politicians, judiciary, media, etc. But the other point also is that what we have seen is a conventional nuclear power plant has very specific site requirements. So therefore, the small modular reactors are basically meant to solve actually three problems. One problem is, like Dr. Kakoda mentioned, if you want to put a conventional reactor, 700 megawatt indigenous, today's cost is 20 crores per megawatt. So you require 14,000 crores for one reactor of 700 megawatt. So obviously, what has to happen is, it is only the government or a government company that can invest in one unit 14,000 crores. So that is one issue. The second thing basically is shortage of sites. Today, the fact is, because we have got two sites which are already earmarked for the American and the French, one at Jaitapur in Maharashtra and other is Kovada in Andhra Pradesh, what's happening is that we don't have any free sites available other than those that are already sanctioned. And that is a very big issue, because we all know that how many years it takes to take a coal plant site from concept to commissioning. In India, it is taking anywhere between 7 to 10 years. But if we look at a nuclear power plant, it is even more. So the whole question is, because you have got such specific requirements for safety reasons, it's very difficult to get those sites. And therefore, very difficult to get that amount of land that is required. The advantage of small modular reactors is, it enables the existing sites to be repurposed. And I'm not talking theory. As I told, we worked on a DAE project. We have identified, and DAE has accepted that these sites are actually fit for small modular reactors. But there is a small twist in the tail, and I will come to that. I won't advance. So the pressure that has actually come for a long time, DAE had that philosophy. It is like ideology that only larger reactors are economical. We should never go towards small reactors. So I had these discussions with at least 2 or 3 former secretaries of DAE, and their mantra was very simple. Economy scale kick in if you go larger, and therefore that is the only way to go. But what has actually happened now, thanks to the global drive for net zero, the research on small modular reactors, which was only in the laboratory or pilot scale, has actually kicked off to actual construction now. Today what is happening is, Canada is actually putting up 4 reactors of GE Hitachi design at a particular place in Canada, in Ontario, where already PSWR, like the Kandu design used in India, are installed.
Is this where Bruce and Darlington are?
Darlington, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Advance. Yeah. Okay. I'll skip out a lot of slides because I think already we are running short of time. And this is the point I want to talk about. What is energy security? It's a much, I think, abused word. And this is the international definition: uninterrupted availability of energy at an affordable price. I think both parts of this definition are very clear. And I think, as Harry rightly mentioned, the whole problem now that we are facing, and I think Mr. Gaurav Gupta also mentioned in the morning, we are adding to the daytime solar, and I have talked to many discoms. They say we don't want any more solar because we don't know what to do with it. So the whole question basically is, unless you have storage, I think the uptake of renewable energy in the country is going to be severely constrained, and therefore the government has to look at ways how do you increase clean base load energy. And the advantage of basically the nuclear sector of nuclear power is that. So we'll just come to this thing, that today we have 52% of the installed capacity is coal. These figures are known, and producing 74% of electricity. Now, does anybody imagine that this 74% will go to near zero in the next 30 years also? Today, those technologies are not available. So the whole question basically is, we are going to be relying on coal for a long time. We have done the projections for 2040 and 2050, and now the Power Minister, after many years, has announced a spate of new plants, mainly because they see that solar and wind together are not going to be able to meet the demand. Therefore, we have problems. So if you look at the actual data, I just checked up yesterday, in first 10 months of the year, coal-fired power generation has grown by 10%. So while we commit to something else in COP, what is actually happening is our emissions are going to grow. And this growth in emissions is going to continue year after year for at least 10 years, maybe 15, 20 years. So the whole question is, how do we do that? The issue is, unless we provide clean base load power generation, either for electricity or for hydrogen, we will not be able to decarbonize and we will not be able to reach net zero. Maybe what I am saying is not something which is pleasant to many policymakers, but I think this is the truth. Now another problem, we all look, basically says, yes, PLI scheme will solve all the problems. I am giving money. If I give money, I do bidding. I have to do only two things. I have to put up a scheme and I have to do bidding. My problem is solved. But sorry, it is not going to happen. If you look at now batteries, this is data from IEA. What basically this shows is that wherever lithium is mined, lithium may be mined in Australia, lithium may be mined in Chile, but ultimately it lands up in China for processing. Why does it land up in China for processing? Mainly because of cheap coal-based energy. Similarly, you look at cobalt, 70% of the world's cobalt reserves are in Congo, ultimately ends up in China for processing, and so on and so forth. So really what is happening is that you have got one country which has stranglehold on many of what is called the new energy materials. And therefore you see the last part of this, batteries, solar PV, wind, even electrolyzers, China has a stranglehold. Is any country able to make this stranglehold, even US, go away? They are trying desperately. But the whole issue is, they are rich enough to basically buy mines anywhere in the world, to buy process plants anywhere in the world. And if they move fast enough with all their political issues, I think they can do it. We don't have that money.
Srikantji, that means we already face the Taiwan problem.
Yes.
China already controls the lithium.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what is actually happening is this, many countries, and this is what the global narrative has changed. After Fukushima, Japan shut down all its nuclear power plants. Now more than 10 of its nuclear power plants has come back online. Similarly now, except Germany, all other countries in Europe are having a nuclear renaissance. And now what has happened is, in COP28, 24 countries have signed a pledge that they will triple nuclear energy by 2050. And in fact, UK has already basically released its action plan, and they're going in a big way for nuclear after being the home of the anti-nuclear movement for many decades. So the narrative is changing. And narrative is changing because what people see is, to combat climate change, there is no other way. We can keep talking about renewable. IEA keeps talking all sorts of things about renewable. But now they have come up with a report saying, unless you do this tripling of nuclear energy, we are not going to reach net zero. That's true for India as well. So this is what is happening. I will not go through this. You can read it if you want. That North America, United Kingdom, European Union, even with Germany there, have all basically going to nuclear in a very big way. And this is despite the fact that you have got a Green Party in Germany, which is actually a sort of, what I would say, holding the edge so that they can bring down the government if they want. And that's the way they have got a stranglehold. But everybody else is basically going the nuclear way, mainly because they realize that they cannot trust China to actually provide them the new energy materials that are required particularly for storage. And I think that is the reality that we need to see. Other countries have seen it. Hopefully we'll wake up and see.
Srikantji, this is very, very interesting and very important. My question to you is this. You have these aircraft carriers which have got a nuclear powered system, or a submarine which has a 25 or a 50 megawatt. Isn't that an SMR? Yes. And how expensive is that to make?
No, those are very expensive, mainly because if you want to go on a ship or if you want to go on this thing, you require very high density, energy density. So they use actually high enriched uranium. So like our Arihant uses more than 20%. I mean, the numbers are not known, but all this, they are all, and those reactors are sealed for 10-15 years. Because to take out the reactor and fuel it, you have to cut upon the submarine, literally. So therefore, they are designed for very long life. For that, they have to have high enriched uranium. Here we are talking about low enriched uranium in most cases. So what are the issues? The issue basically is that it is not that we don't have the capacity. We have the capacity. What is happening is, one thing is that we are having a large number of reactors under construction today, and thanks to Russia, the largest ever nuclear power plant in India is coming up in Kodamkulam, and there are, I think, more than 10,000 people working on that site now. The Russian ambassador had gone there recently. Despite the Ukraine war, that plant is actually, construction is going on, and whatever was parts were coming from Ukraine, they are now given it for manufacture to BHEL. So therefore, those projects are happening. But what it is that you will only reach 22.5 gigawatt in another 7-8 years or so. It's pathetically low. It just doesn't cut the ice. But what is happening in the meantime, Dr. Kakodkar alluded to it. I come from a steel background. I worked in Tata Steel for many years. One thing is basically the pressure. Because India is the second largest steel producer in the world today, just behind China. I mean, not just behind, far behind China, but still the second largest producer. We have got excellent iron ore, which is able to make our steel very competitive. We have coking coal, but we are not using it the way it should be done. But the big thing that is going to happen is they are all going to be hit with high carbon taxes. And already the process of tax, which is the carbon border adjustment tax, has already been notified, and in another 7-8 years they are going to be hit with the high carbon taxes, and therefore they will lose a very profitable, both steel industries and aluminum industries are going to lose a very profitable, very attractive market for their steel and aluminum. So therefore what has now happened is, there is now anything in India today, I think all of us know, this is the most industry friendly government we can get in the country after many, many years. So what's happening is the pressure that they have put on the country, on the government. Now NPCIL, for a long time they said, we will not do small reactors, we only will go up. They are now looking at using upgraded 220 megawatt reactors for supplying clean hydrogen and power with suitable changes in the AERB siting criteria. Okay, but on the other hand, what is happening is that if you look at the G20 summit, there is one paragraph only on small modular reactors. And the reason that paragraph is there is not just by accident or because of lobbying, because what the Western world is facing now, they do not have enough welders, they do not have enough machinists, they don't have the skilled manpower enough to basically triple their nuclear manufacturing capacity, and they can't actually outsource to China, which was their strategy so far. So they are actually looking to India, the world's second largest population, to basically provide, to be the global hub for manufacture of SMRs. This is the opportunity. If you are looking at a manufacturing resolution of a revolution, if you are looking at high-tech manufacturing which can get high-tech jobs and high-skilled, high-paying jobs, this is a great opportunity for us, and that is why this is basically there in the G20 statement. It is also there in the Indo-US joint statement, which was signed at the President and Prime Minister meeting in New York in Washington, D.C. on June 2023. So this is the way that world is moving. While on the other hand, DA says, I will not allow foreign technology to come. I will do only with basically my own homegrown technology. Yes, that is fine. But the other hand, what is happening is the world needs this. The world needs India. And that is why they are all looking at, actually, I know for a fact, American Westinghouse, Russian Rosatom, they all come to India and said that we are ready to transfer the technology. You make in India. Now, this is what basically is happening because they all want India to manufacture them because we have the manpower, we have the skills, and another thing is we have good IP protection, unlike other countries. I think these things are important.
I was just talking to somebody and I said, 20 crores a megawatt you can get an SMR made in India. अरे यार बहुत expensive है, 5 crore per megawatt तो solar है first class. I said, but solar is every 6 hours. Multiply 6 into 4, that's 20 crores. It's the same price. It's just that people are not thinking like that. But may I request you to go straight to the small modular reactors and finish it off because we're running out of time.
So this is basically the reason why it is required is site flexibility. I already mentioned that. The small reactors are smaller, obviously. They are very small cores. They can be provided with enhanced seismic isolation, which actually means they are standardized products. So the difference between a small modular reactor and a large reactor is a a project. A small modular reactor is a product. And that's the difference between the two. And obviously, the economies of scale of products will happen only when you have an assembly line and you start manufacture. And that is the principle, and these studies have been done, that you can actually bring down the cost by 40% after you make 15 reactors, and that is the way that things are actually going. So therefore, they may have a lower capex per unit, but it is like the sachet for shampoo. If I can afford only a sachet, it may be costlier per milliliter, but I will still take it because that's what I can afford, that's the money I have in my pocket. So if you look at industries which are basically high carbon intensive industries, steel, aluminium, their main business is in aluminium and steel. So if they want energy because of the CBAM, they say, itna hi paisa hai, isme kya kar sakte hain?
So what you're saying is a big breakthrough for India is to use existing or old sites of power plants which have been shut down, abandoned, etc.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'll show you that.
And for that you need an SMR.
Yes.
You can't have a proper nuclear plant.
So I'll show that. See, another thing is what is also a misunderstanding within DIE is, and which hopefully is getting resolved, that SMR is not a replacement for a conventional reactor. This is nothing like, India is a country where, dil mange more. We need solar, we need wind, we need hydro, we need coal, we need nuclear, we need everything. Because our needs are very high. If you look at our median age, it is 28 years. And compared to EU, 42 years. So aspirations are high. So therefore, but what is the problem that we have is lack of positive public perception, environmental clearance, of course AERB clearances are required. And this positive perception is something that needs to be addressed by DIE urgently. Now I come to, I see Mr. Karsha Prasad here. This is what is happening here. Though we have, as said, because we don't have enough capacity, we will not actually allow the plants to retire now, or we don't recommend the plants to retire. Many state governments, basically, they have gone beyond the jugaad. They are not able to maintain many of these obsolete plants anymore. They are shutting down. Telangana is shutting down. As and when a new plant comes up, they have enough capacity in the state, they are able to shut down their oldest units. And we see here that basically, that there are units. I'm not talking about the 500 megawatt, which are basically the efficient subcritical units. But there are large number of units below 250 megawatt, which are actually very inefficient and very carbon intensive. Therefore, if we continue to grow our coal-based capacity, if we don't basically progressively retire these plants, maybe after 2030, what will happen is our emission factors are going to increase, they are not going to decrease. That is the fact. So therefore, at some point of time, these are not forever. After 2030, we have to retire. And the opportunity that we have is that we can use some of these sites for two things. Some sites can be repurposed for SMRs, for a coal to nuclear transition. And definitely, because what will happen definitely after 2030 is, you cannot have coal-based power plants which are not abatement ready. That means which are not carbon capture ready. And IGCC technology is that technology which actually gives CO2 in a stream which can be captured. It is already proven by BHEL in their pilot plant, but unfortunately, it is not getting traction in industry. Hopefully.
5 minutes now. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Sir, you talked about this, right? This is a particular site for a steel plant. So this is where I earmarked. So you can see the ash dam of this. We talk about nuclear waste. This ash dam itself is about 250 acres. And you can look at basically a 2 into 220 megawatt small reactor next door. And therefore, this is the opportunity.
This is Orissa.
Yes. Yeah. Orissa.
So clever I am, from the satellite I can make out.
Correct. So therefore, what you can see here is, we have done these studies for multiple plants in India. And that is why what we feel is, advantage of this is, this is going to come with the AERB approval for a smaller exclusion zone, only 0.5. And that is a red circle that is there, is a 0.5 kilometer circle around the green dot. Each of the green dots is one reactor. And that is the advantage, is it minimizes the land acquisition. It actually, this actual site completely is under the control of a particular steel plant. So therefore, they are not going to go for any basically big problem in acquiring the land. Of course, they have to manage the public perception. Now, last 3 slides on policy recommendation. What needs to be done? So first is basically what I feel is nuclear power is not getting its due share in the sense that it is not eligible today for many of the privileges that the solar and wind enjoy. And I think it is high time we recognize that this has to happen. Then it is not even declared as a green infrastructure sector because today it is totally in government. Tomorrow, one thing is very sure, considering the fact that the government budget is limited and we are going to have this Garib Kalyani Yojana, etc. for many years. So the whole question basically is, where is the money? That is one of the key problems which I think if you have to go at the present pace, maybe money can be internally generated. But if you want to multiply by this phase of expansion by a factor of 5, factor of 10, then we need to have private sector come into and private sector will definitely demand, because ultimately if you are looking at carbon intensity, nuclear is the cleanest sector by far, and therefore all these things have to happen. So US has already started giving tax credits for coal to nuclear transition. I think that is something that we should also do, because land is available, grid is available, water is available. I don't know why we should not do this. So of course what now required is, you require the amendment of the Atomic Energy Act. And I am saying it's not a wholesale amendment. I am not saying that we should allow, it's easy to say that a private sector will put up a conventional power plant. I think those days are not today. Nobody is going to risk that amount of capital today. Maybe after 10 years, 15 years, but not today. At least the market for small reactors is very high, and the payer is not a DISCOM. The person who is going to procure the power is a steel plant or aluminum plant who already has existing power plants, so they will take the power and they will pay. And of course what can happen is, like DGCA, 30 years back basically there was only Air India, Indian Airlines. Now we have got, now Air India 2 years back was public sector, now it is 100% private. I think it is as safe, if not more safe than what it was. You need a good regulator. And that regulator, I am not saying anything about ARB, the capacity has to be increased. I think that point has been made very much. So one thing, NTPC. Though NTPC has made some baby steps by signing a joint venture agreement, I think all of us know basically joint venture, two public sector companies, each having their own egos. I think we can all, you can see what's happening. It has taken 10, 11 years for anything to happen. They are still not basically done any groundbreaking on a single site till date. So the whole question is, why can't NTPC do on its own? After all, when it came to supercritical, ultra supercritical plants, they did things on their own. They got the best technology in the world. They actually, trusted the technology partner. Progressively, indigenization happened. The same thing can be repeated in nuclear. Why not trust India's largest power company? Right. But what you can do is, you can have an operator. The operator is different from the owner. The Atomic Energy Act recognizes operator and all the liabilities on the operator. The operator can still be Nuclear Power Corporation. There are many plants, I know, where the owner is a public sector company, but the operator is somebody else. So the same thing can be done. So you can have NPCL as an operator for 10, 15 years, and that is what has been done. Look at UAE, 0 to 4 reactors of 1400 megawatt each. And that is all being done. First Koreans came in, they set up a company for operation along with the UAE people, and I can tell you today, in that plant, more than 100 people from Nuclear Power Corporation are there. So what is actually happening is, a brain drain is actually happening from within NPCIL. Rather than going and building other plants in India and operating other plants, they are operating plants in UAE. So this is very obvious. You have got airports here. What is the security angle? Do we see that CISF is there. Basically, they don't care for who is airport manager, airport owner. They will do their job independently. So therefore, the same thing can be done. So many of the issues of safety, security are all solvable. And therefore, what I feel is, what should DIE do? DIE should do uranium storage and reprocessing. Because for a long time, we will be depending on imported uranium. They should do that. They should not set up more nuclear power plants, but they should set up this uranium storage, reprocessing facilities, and they should be the custodian for all radioactive waste. Last but not the least, the CLND Act is the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. Today, the Act explicitly says it is meant only for government or government companies. Very clear. There is a particular section.
Section 22.
Yeah, so that has to be amended. And what I would say is, today this is one sector where I find there are FAQs. Two sets of FAQs have been issued because the language of the CL&D Act, and we all know, I think Harry is a veteran of this, that the language doesn't coincide with what is there in the rules. The rules don't coincide with what is there in the FAQ. So this is absolutely fit for what I would say a judicial, pandemonium. So therefore, these provisions have to be aligned and these things can be done. So then what you can do is to allay the public. You can actually definitely say, increase the limitation of liability. Today, the operator liability is limited to 1,500 crores. The government liability is limited to something like 3,300 crores. It has never been used. So definitely you can actually build it up.
Can we finish it off?
Yeah, this is last slide. Okay.
Please.
So this is what I'm saying, that in the long term, the government can direct government companies like NMDC, HCL, to go and explore uranium mines abroad. NMDC is actually mining coking coal in Mozambique. So instead of doing coking coal, they also should do strategic minerals like uranium, maybe lithium. There is a company called Kabil, but I think you need more cash-rich companies to do these things. And last but not the least, timely disclosures. What is happening today, I had a slide which I skipped. Our radioactive emissions at the site boundary, which is 1.6 kilometers from each reactor today, it is 1/1000th of the safe limit. 1/1000th, let me repeat. If you go to Kudunkulam, that light water reactors, it is basically 1/10,000th of that. So the whole question is, our reactors are excellent, very well operated, very safe, but whole problem is well-guarded secret in the AERB annual report, which comes 2 years late. So what I feel is, we need to change the narrative. The narrative needs to be changed because otherwise this growth is not going to happen. And I think that is what is actually required. More transparency. And
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Do so. Excellent presentation. Sorry I had to rush him through. He normally needs 2 to 3 hours. Mr. Kakotkar needs 1 day at least. Now we are lucky enough to have the former director of NPCIL, who's only going to answer a specific issue. And the specific issue is this: how much cash can NPCIL generate or does have to add capacity every year, in what quantum? Because the skeptics in the audience, I must share with you, Kirit, na? Right? Is that they feel that nobody will finance nuclear power, etc., etc. And therefore, just to cover your point, what Dr. Kakotkar suggested is that there could be a joint venture between a government entity and a private sector. Government entity could take care of the nuclear reactor and the private sector could take care of the generation of electricity. And so it's an old proposition, but it's been going on for the last 15, 20 years. We were also involved in the last slide you mentioned. IPPI was very much involved in sitting in Washington in the 2007, 8, 9 period where unlimited liability, thanks to the Bhopal gas tragedy, was discussed, etc., etc. But then, as you rightly said, GE and Westinghouse have been bought out by the Japs. And so the Japs have been very, very cautious after Fukushima and are given to understand the safeguards have made it so expensive that there's a whole relook at setting up new nuclear reactors. Sir, specific question to you. Being director NPCIL in financing, tell us how much cash did you have or do you have that you can, let us say instead of setting up 700 megawatts every year, you set up 10,000 megawatts every year. How do you do it?
Okay. To answer this question in a very specific way, I refer to NPCIL's annual report in 22-23. It's the last one. As per that report, NPCIL's profit, net profit after payment of taxes, was 5,200 crores or something like that. 5,200 crores. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And then there is one more thing also mentioned there is the balance carried forward. That is, balance was carried forward and to add it to that this. So the balance cash with NPCIL at 31st March to 23 was about 20,000 crores. Now Dr. Kakotkar was mentioning, for example, is that 1 lakh crores we would be starting 10 reactors, that is 5 stations of 2 twin units. So that's
700 each.
Yeah, 700. So that's 700 unit, 2 units. So that means 2 units of 700, what you are mentioning is costs about 20,000 crores. Now, the NPCIL right now can build plants with 30-70 equity debt ratio. Now, that means with this present reserves itself, NPCIL can support a program of 3 stations straight away by itself. And with
Of
this
1400 megawatts each.
Yes, they can initiate that. Right? Okay, that much money can be committed. Now, added to that, this every year now is 5,000 crores. This is going to increase only. That's what I am saying is that the funding-wise there is no problem. Sites are available, and then NPCIL can really take off in a big way. And then Dr. Kakodkar was also mentioning about these joint ventures with PSUs. 2 such joint ventures are already formed. In fact, they formed about 10 years back. One with Indian Oil Corporation and one with NTPC. And he was also mentioning that also is I'm aware of that in the sense that organization, other energy sector PSUs like ONGC and other oil companies, and then some PSUs which are intensive users of electricity, like say NALCO. They were also ready to participate as a joint venture partner. Haryana government, state government of Haryana, when we were planning those 4 units in Haryana, we initially started with 2, so they were asking us to start 4, other 2 we will fund 50% of the equity we are in this year. So that kind of enthusiasm.
Who fixes the tariff of electricity for you?
Now about tariff I recall the time when I was working in this Kakrapa 3-4, we had worked out a tariff of about 3.5.
वो ठीक है. Who works the tariff? You guys work out your own tariff?
No. Basically, there are certain guidelines from governments on that, for that, and then it is based on the way any power producer would.
So basically, capital cost versus
capital
interest.
Cost, yes.
And your variable cost is what? 5 paisa? What is variable cost? 5 paisa? 10 paisa?
Actually, the variable cost is a small portion. I don't recall the number, but then major.
See, he's very diplomatic. He's not saying 5 paisa.
Cost is the major.
I know, it's capex. Yes.
Capital intensive, and then running costs are very low, fueling costs are low, and then it is insulated also from inflation because once you have spent. But then capital cost, this whole thing depends on controlling the capital cost.
Yes.
And therefore the schedule is extremely important for that because the IDC will build up.
So what do you think is the reason why we can't expand, explode the capacity? You got money, you got reserves, you got your own way of fixing your own, this thing. There's a demand for power.
There must have been some constraint which
Ghanshyam ji, देखो क्या हो रहा है हमारे देश में. थोड़ा इधर भी ध्यान दो sir.
Actually, I am fortunate to see that our 2 former directors were board members, independent board members are present here.
Who?
Bajaj sir and Rakesh Nath sir.
Oh, okay. I thought you talked about VP Raja. Okay.
Maybe they also can. But
Bajaj sir is very powerful and so is Rakesh Nath ji. But my point is, since we have the chairman of the Central Electricity Authority, who has, of course, no authority over nuclear, but at least he can have a peep and see if he can contribute on that, you know.
In fact, chairman of the Central Electricity Authority is a member of the
He said
board
so.
of
I deliberately wanted to provoke him,
ex-officio
but he's
member
not
of the
getting
board.
provoked. That's my problem, yaar, Bajaj sahab.
And
अभी lunch के बाद थोड़ा बहुत तो excitement होना चाहिए ना, ऐसे कैसे चलेगा?
now, as far as tariff is concerned, the Nuclear Power Corporation set up a committee for determining the tariff for the atomic power plant. And that committee decides the tariff.
In which you were sitting.
But it is not transparent, number one.
Yes.
They don't declare the cost of the heavy water, and there are so many other factors which are not declared.
But capex is transparent, no? Yeah.
No, capex it doesn't. There
The
are
main
other
cost of
costs.
capex here, no?
There are other
I
costs.
think this
With so much a high capex, this cost cannot be 3 rupees or something like that.
actually what I would suggest is that say on this is that I really don't know why that allegation of non-transparency is there. Shrikant also said up also. Basically, heavy water costs are heavy. Let us understand is that heavy water and fuel, as per Atomic Energy Act and as per the policy of government, is owned by government. Okay, NPCIL is not even empowered to own these two products. They are available to NPCIL on lease. Okay, and then the lease charges are reflecting into the costing and they are reflecting into the annual report and everything, very transparently shared. So those charges are there, and definitely these lease charges are worked out on the cost of heavy water at which it is produced, and the way the inventory is kept, and then the inventory with NPCIL. NPCIL costing has an element because there are some heavy water losses taking place, and which NPCIL has to replace because evaporation or whatever it is. That is reflecting into the cost of power which NPCIL is having. Same thing goes on fuel also.
You're subject to CAG audit, yeah. CAG audit to hota hai aapka.
CAG audit hai.
And then you also have the Atomic Energy Regulatory Body sitting in Vienna. They're also keeping a peep on what you guys are doing.
I would request you to please go through the annual report. They are available for our year and they are very transparent.
Okay.
Likewise, on this comments on this lack of transparency, that is also is not true.
No.
Is that this release data is fully available in this AERB, and then NPCIL submits it.
So safety is taken care of by AERB, and the tariff is fixed based on a formula. Ghanshyam ji, of course, I got it. Mic, पीछे दे दो सब, बजाज साहब, mic दे दो.
देखिए टैरिफ फिक्सेशन में AERB का कोई खास रोल नहीं है. दैट इज नंबर 1.
तो सेफ्टी के लिए है ना.
सेफ्टी इज फाइन. सेफ्टी इज फाइन. नंबर 1. नंबर 2, जो भी इसकी टैरिफ डिटरमिन होती है, इंसिडेंटली CA इज इन्वॉल्व इन रिकमेंडिंग दैट टैरिफ. Number 3 is, as per the grid code also, nuclear is also coming in the kitty of must run. And must run होने के हिसाब से, that means whatever energy that they are generating, we have to consume into the system. Accordingly, the tariff of nuclear has been set as a per unit tariff. अभी भी उसका per unit tariff है, 2-part tariff अभी भी इसका नहीं है, because we are taking the entire energy. जिस दिन ये flexing करना शुरू कर देंगे nuclear, we can go even for the 2-part tariff. Absolutely no issues on that. So जो आपने पूछा था ना कि fuel charge का उसका क्या है and ये है, तो it hardly matters to me as a taker of power, and I am more interested in the energy that I am getting, and if I am priced based on that must run principles which is applied equally to the solar as well as wind, वहाँ भी हम क्या करते हैं, per unit लेते हैं because it's a must run. I have no option but to take that power.
Okay. Yep. So basically, where I was coming from when I'll just finish. Sir, may I react to him because वो इतनी fast react करता ना मैं भूल जाता हूँ क्या कहना है. I'm growing old, sir.
Same here.
अच्छा, okay. You also forget. Very good. Basically, I had we done a study in EPI way back in early 2000s on the different reactors in India and particularly the CANDU technology in Tarapur somewhere. तो हमें पता चला 15 पैसे इनकी cost होती है variable nuclear की. And rest of course, is capex, shapex, and that's when I went to NPCIL and had a long meeting and discussion with them. And they said, yeah, we have to generate our own capex and we have to generate our own money so we can expand. We don't really borrow too much money from banks at that time. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the latest figures, but when I was in the NPCIL board, the cost of generation of a nuclear plant, the tariff was lower than a non-pit head thermal plant. And as you rightly said, variable cost is quite low, and it is comparable or lower than the variable cost of.
But Ghanshyam's point, it doesn't matter because it's must run. तो क्या फर्क पड़ता है? Merit order तो है ही नहीं उसमें.
Right.
Merit ही merit है, order तो है ही नहीं.
And CA is involved in the deciding the tariff.
Correct. Recommending or deciding? Recommending or deciding the tariff?
No, they recommend,
Recommending.
they are part of the process. Part of the process. So everything is checked there.
No, that's why I said it makes sense because CA is ultimately involved in the entire ecosystem of power. So one type of power is flowing in, it may be nuclear. It is affecting the entire electricity industry, isn't it?
And I can say that the contract systems of Nuclear Power Corporation are one of the best amongst the PSU. Maybe better than other PSUs.
Sounds good. Okay. Sorry for being a spoil sport. Any questions? Okay. Mr. Soni, right there at the back. Soni sir, now you're going nuclear, I can see.
Sir, on a lighter side, every time I write nuclear, U and N gets interchanged.
Who gets what?
U and N becomes interchange, you know?
Unclear.
Yes.
अच्छा. आपका unclear है, ठीक है?
So that is one problem. The other problem is, even if it is energy, what is the problem in declaring the variable charge and fixed charges? The maintenance can be planned accordingly. People will know about the value. Why forcefully put must run administratively when we are talking about market and so many things? Coming to flexibility, we keep on interacting with French operators. They do flex their generators. We understand that it has to be said in advance. I have talked to many plants, all the plant chiefs, including directors, and Mr. Grover and Kakutkar Saab. I said, I will give you 1 week advance notice that during Sunday, 5 hours, I want only 5% symbolic reduction in nuclear generation so that I don't have to stop the machine, thermal machine. Sir, in this way, as an operator, we lose confidence. You are not ready to come on the table to discuss in the OCC the problems of the nuclear. That is why I say, to me, UNN gets interchanged. Sorry for being very candid, and we can get into lots of details.
Thank you.
But nuclear must go into multi-part tariff, must flex. It should
Noted, sir.
abide by all of these things.
Noted. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Guys, I have to close this session. Anybody has any questions, and please react with our experts. I apologize to Dikshit Saab. I didn't give him any time at all to present his presentation. Gulrez, please make sure that you circulate his presentation. Sorry, no more questions. Thank you so much, and a round of applause. I'm going to invite the session which got postponed and now it's come right back, Mr. Rakesh Nath, who are to chair it, Hemant Sahai and Hemant Singh, on the issues of laws and regulations of the Indian power sector. राकेश नाथ जी कहाँ चले गए? Please come. So I'm going to start introducing our two legal speakers. Hemant Sahai is the founder of HSA Associates, and more than anything else, Hemant is one of the oldest players in the power sector. All the people who've been around in the power sector from the year 2002 onwards would absolutely have known him or met him at some stage or the other, if not having fought any litigations with him. Very eloquent, erudite, and a brilliant person. He's also been an advisor to the Planning Commission. He's done some stuff with the Planning Commission as well. He's dealt with some very difficult people in the Planning Commission in those days, no names mentioned. And he was able to convince them and sort things out as we went along. And so therefore, Hemant Sahai brings with him enormous amount of experience on how the Electricity Act was first thought of as the Electricity Act 2001. A lot of us were part of that informal mission going all over the country, getting opinions from people on how the act should be, how it should be, curated, how should it come up, etc., etc. 2001, 2002, and finally it got cleared in the year 2003. That too, it was a conditional clearance. To those of you who don't know, maybe over dinner I can tell you the story. along with him, we have Hemant Singh, who's a founder and managing partner of Chartered Law, one of the rising companies in the last 10, 12 years, who have also been part of the setup and the ecosystem and the curation of the electricity laws and the electricity, issues, having got a lot of experience in APTEL, in the Supreme Court, High Court, and the regulatory commissions all over the country. And talking about APTEL, the Guruji is sitting right here, has been a judge. He's also been chairman of CEA. He's also been MD of Bhakra Byas project. And also, to those of you who don't know, he was the first guy who did a power transaction as PTC, Power Trading Corporation. So a lot of different colors. I'm going to now hand over to Rakesh Nath ji to conduct this session. My basic submission is we're looking at how effective are power regulations in India and what are the legal challenges. There are hundreds of them, but maybe they can come up with a couple of examples. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. The desirable attributes of an effective regulatory systems are independence, transparency, predictability, accountability, institutional capability, timely disposal of cases, and enforcement of the decision. Now let us see briefly how our regulatory systems have operated in the last 20 years in each of these areas. So as far as the independence is concerned, I think the electricity law is very clear. The object and reason clearly says that Electricity Act is being... Yeah. So that is the distancing the government from the regulatory systems and allowing the regulatory commissions to take over. And adequate provisions have been given to give the financial and the operational independence to the regulatory commission, electricity regulatory commissions. We have a provision for a special creation of a special fund, which is to be financed by a grant or loan from the appropriate government, and the fees that the regulatory commission charges from the parties to give the financial autonomy. And many of the regulatory commissions, this is functional. The regulatory commission is free to appoint its staff in consultation with the government. And they have given huge functions of determination of tariff, regulation of tariff, adjudication of disputes, specify and enforce the standards of quality, specify grid code, promote RE, and develop power markets. And they have the powers of the civil courts to, under the CPC, for summoning, for discovery of production of any documents to be used as a evidence, recording evidence, requisition of any public records, and reviewing its decision. So they have huge powers. Of course, the appropriate government under the Act has powers to direct the regulatory commission in the matter of public interest. And at quite a few occasions, the government, state governments have utilized, and even central government has utilized these powers. And but these powers cannot go beyond a certain limit. And I remember a case came before us in the tribunal from Uttarakhand, where the Uttarakhand government directed the regulatory commission of Uttarakhand to determine tariff in a particular manner. And then one of the parties challenged that order of the commission, decided the tariff accordingly. And one party challenged that order, and it came before the APTEL, and APTEL said that under the provision of the Act and Section 107, state government can give the directions, but if these directions are in the matter of the statutory functions of the regulatory commission, the regulatory commission can consider and then decide on its own whether to follow those directions or not. And it is the basic functions of tariff determination, I think the government cannot give a direction because that is not a direct matter of public interest. Of course, in matters like decarbonization and all, definitely the government can tell and can give the directions to regulatory commission. In the act, though adequate powers have been provided in the act, but there is a general perception that many regulators are not independent when it comes to determination of tariff, retail supply tariff, and especially when it results in increase in tariff. And there have been cases where in some of the states the tariff was not determined for 7 years. And I remember in 2011, Ministry of Power sent us a letter that some of the states are facing huge, distribution companies are facing huge financial problem, and they are not able to buy power from the market, and therefore they had to carry out load shedding, and they are not able to meet their consumer demand. And then the tribunal, under the powers vested upon them under Section 121, gave directions to the regulatory commissions after hearing them that they must determine tariff every year. They must decide the adequate fuel and power purchase surcharge. At least every quarter it should be passed on to the consumers, and so on and so forth. And in case the distribution company does not file the petition, then they could initiate the proceedings and get the data and decide the tariff on their own by suo moto action, and their regulations provide for suo moto proceedings. I also remember a very interesting case which came to, because Mr. Harry Doyle many times talks about the open access and freedom to the consumer to take power in the open access. One very interesting case came to us in the tribunal from Punjab, because Punjab in the paddy season used to impose power cuts and restrict supply to industry. In fact, they direct closure of industry for a week or 10 days or 15 days to give uninterrupted adequate supply to the 8 to 10 hour supply to the agriculture pumping operations. And during that period, some industries, instead of closing the industry, they procured power in the open access from market. But at the end of the month, the distribution company imposed the surcharge, because the provisions of the Act says that if a consumer procures electricity from source other than distribution company, then the surcharge is, they have to pay surcharge to the distribution company to compensate them for the loss that they have incurred due to this paying consumer switching over to another source of supply. So the regulatory commission, state regulatory commission, mechanically interpreted the provisions of the Act and said, yes, this surcharge is to be paid. And that the case came to the tribunal, and then we went into the basics of the surcharge. The surcharge is basically to compensate the distribution company for the loss that they incur when the paying consumer switches over or procures supply from alternate source. But in this particular case, since there was a power cut, the distribution company did not incur any loss. So there is no way the industry could be asked to pay the surcharge. And it was duty of if an individual consumer can procure power from the market, it was easier for the distribution company to procure the same power and maintain uninterrupted supply to the industry. So if the industry has done on their own and the distribution company has failed to carry out their functions, the burden should not be passed on the industry. As far as the transparency is concerned, I think transparency is ensured by the following the procedures, making regulations, and the adequate provisions are there in the Act to do the prior publication of the application for tariff, where the public can file their objection and suggestions. All stakeholders can be present before, put their commission before the tariff is decided. And same thing applies to regulations, where when a new regulations are formed, then the draft is circulated and comments are taken. And I think as far as the transparency is concerned, I feel quite satisfied that the regulatory commissions are operating transparently. Only some state commissions I find they don't give the statement of object and reason and the explanatory note when they make the regulations. So how they have considered the objection and suggestions, I think that should come out clearly. Predictability, I think the consistency in regulation very important for new investment to come in the sector, for the investors to be comfortable, and I think the regulators have performed quite well, and I think they have been quite consistent since 2004. As far as the Central Commission is concerned, I think no major change has been made in the tariff determination, and very positive, progressive regulations have been made relating to ancillary services, relating to GNA regulations, sharing of transmission charges. Things have been simplified and provide a lot of flexibility to the players. The timely disposal of cases, I think, is a cause of concern. I do not have the data of the state commissions because this data is not available on the website, but Tribunal recently put this data on the website, and I find that before the Tribunal, about 650 to 700 cases, new appeals are filed every year, and about 300 to 350 cases, means 50% of the cases are disposed of, and there are 2,500 pending cases. So with the present strength of Tribunal, and which also I find sometimes the appointments are not paid in time, though there is a provision in the Act that 6 months before the retirement of a member, the government should initiate the selection process, but that is not being done. And many a times I find Tribunal remains only practically one bench operates out of two. So the efficiency is straight away cut to 50%. And in 5 years that I spent in Tribunal, at least 2 years, only single bench was operating, and I was working in two benches parallelly. So that, I think, there is a need for enhancing the strength of the Tribunal benches to double at least, so that the cases do not pile up and the objective of quick disposal and giving the justice to the parties is achieved. As far as the accountability is concerned, I think the accountability only to the extent that the orders of the commissions are challenged in the Tribunal, and Tribunal also has powers under Section 121 to give directions to the Commission in case they found lacking in not exercising their powers, their functions according to the provisions of the Act. And on 2-3 occasions, the Tribunal has utilized these powers and given directions to the Commissions in the matter of determination of tariff, in the matter of appointment of CGRF, ombudsman, etc. Another factor is the institutional capability, and I think that is something which is a cause of concern. Mr. Soni, in his presentation in one of the sessions, laid stress on this, and I find that state regulatory commissions are very understaffed, inadequately staffed. On the appointment of the members and chairmen, we have no control. The systems will continue sometimes. We'll have excellent people having total exposure of the sector, and sometimes we get average people who want to do but are not able to do because of lack of knowledge, and there the staff plays a very important role. And I have seen the regulatory commissions abroad. In US, each regulatory commission has a huge staff, 50 to 100, who carry out all the base work, the research, the analysis, collection of data, and give the present the complete picture before the Commission to enable the Commission to take the progressive decisions in the matter of orders and making regulation. So institution capability, I think, requires a strengthening, and in my view, if we have a all India cadre of regulators, not only electricity, but the natural gas and fuel, oil, and airport, other regulators, a common cadre could be instituted centrally, and then they could be, based on the requisitions given by the regulatory commissions, the staff could be deputed to them, so that we get the right staff, permanent staff who can provide good service and help the regulators to to work effectively and efficiently. Enforcement of decisions, I think APTEL has powers under the of the civil code to enforce their decision, but same powers are not available to the commissions. They can only impose some petty fine of 1 lakh rupees or 6,000 rupees per day, which is a very petty fine. I think powers of the civil courts should be entrusted to the regulatory commission to make them more effective, so that their orders could be enforced. So these are few points I had, and I will pass on the mic to Mr. Hemant Sahai to give his views about the workings of the commissions and what are the challenges, legal challenges. He has a large experience in the regulatory matters, and over to Hemant Sahai.
Thank you, sir. So there is the Act, there is regulation, there is also law. So it's binding on everybody, including us as practitioners, including the regulatory commissions. Sounds simple, and everybody should abide by that law and those regulations. But unfortunately, it's not so simple. And what happens is, as a practitioner, I should be thrilled that there's ambiguity. It leads to more business for me. But reality is that interpretation of some very basic expressions can lead to huge amounts of disputes. So public interest was one of the favorite buzzwords that was used in the initial years by the establishments as well as by a lot of the state-level commissions to justify their decisions. It actually took a Supreme Court to explain that public interest is not just tariff, it's not just consumer interest. It takes investors to be active in the sector, and therefore public interest is broad-based. Another judgment I recall, it took Mr. Deo when he was in Maharashtra to explain that cross-subsidy surcharge and the additional surcharge should be in the context of open access. If there is no redundant transmission capacity, then why will you charge additional surcharge? And even in the context of captive power generation, open access, one of the first regulators to take a balanced, pragmatic view. So we've had all of those kinds of experiences. More recently, one of the state regulators, after bidding has been done for a waste-to-energy project, not bidding, allocation has been done as per the policy. The tariff adoption was not done for a long time, which is required to be done under the legislation. And then he decides to come with regulations to say, actually all projects will now be issued through bidding process, and including projects which may have been awarded, but the tariff has not been adopted. So the incongruity of these kinds of interpretations, I think, have just kind of complicated issues at the at the regulatory level. I think, but there's a lot of good things that have been done. For example, I must say that enforcement of RPO, SPO by the regulators has been impeccable. I mean, despite a lot of opposition, including in states where more recently we've seen significant political interference, where ultimately the regulators stood up and said, no, I mean, this is an obligation to be enforced. So those are, I think, some commendable, I would say, initiatives that have been taken and enforced by the regulators, not merely because the law required them to do so, but I think they understood how the sector and how the industry must evolve. And so I think we've had, as a practitioner over the last several years, I've seen great decisions, great initiatives, absolutely wonderful direction being taken by the regulators. And sometimes it happens, the state regulators tend to be a little bit partisan and not entirely, balanced. But I think that's part of the overall game. Fortunately, I think the APTEL has over the years crystallized a lot of the issues. And today, I think, frankly, apart from commercial disputes, a lot of the regulatory issues, including issues on change in law, which keep coming up from time to time, they've been sorted out. The principles have been sorted out, and I think it's really part of the evolution of the sector. In other parts of the world, I think similar kind of experiences have been there as the regulatory regime has evolved over the years. Concepts have been put to test, and the sector is such, the power sector is such, that it's not just all about pure legal issues and legal interpretation. There are a lot of economic and financial issues, and yes, indeed, some credible, legitimate public interest issues. And as a regulator, one of the mandates is to balance all of these interests. And that's the reason why I think the regulators today in India don't take a pure or very, very strict legal approach to everything. When there are contractual disputes, certainly they have to. But when it comes to the realm of regulation, in creating those regulations and interpreting those regulations, there is a very significant technical, economic, finance, bankability, viability set of issues. And the fact that the renewable sector has grown so significantly is testimony to the fact that the regulators are aligned, and they're aligned to the larger objective. They're aligned with the larger direction that the industry and the country is taking. And therefore, they also do look beyond just the sector itself. I think as we move along further, I'm sure that things will become increasingly more predictable and credible. And that's one of the things that Mr. Nath just mentioned. For any serious investor to come in with fresh capex in this sector, he requires predictability on the regulatory aspects. I think we are there to a large extent. I'm sure that, we'll keep improving in that direction.
Just to take the discussion forward, what Mr. Sahai has said. Now, we have seen a lot of regulatory commissions, state regulatory commissions. Every commission has its own regulations. Now, there were problems. So the center tried to step in. And how do they step in? They create the rules. Now, whatever center is doing, I am principally agreeable to that. But are the rules binding on the state commissions? That is a big question. Now, I wouldn't name a commission, but I was asked for an opinion, and I gave the opinion that commissions can deviate. Because if you see Section 181, it says the regulations have to be consistent with the Act and the rules generally. So therefore, there is a general adherence to the rules under the Act, but not consistency with the rules. So therefore, the regulators do have the freedom to deviate from the rules and maintain some independence. So that is one aspect which the central government should think, and maybe if it can amend the Act itself. Because what has happened is that a lot of rules have come in, it's like a parallel act. Now recently what has happened is the consumers have been given the right to build a dedicated transmission line. Now no one will challenge it, but it is contrary to the Electricity Act, because under the Act only generators or captive generators are allowed dedicated transmission lines. A consumer is not allowed dedicated transmission lines. Now third, what I would like to say is that the GNA regulations. Now GNA regulations, if we remember, 2004 the original CRC regulations came. The concept was connectivity and open access was combined. Then in the 2009 regulations, it was bifurcated. So you can have a connectivity and you can choose to take open access or not. Now under GNA it is again combined. Now I'm talking from the perspective of the industrial consumers, like bulk consumers. So if a bulk consumer has to take a connectivity, he has to mandatorily take GNA. which is a kind of absurdity, and I myself have filed petitions before CRC for clarification. Now, one important aspect of GNA is that it has introduced the concept of transfer of GNA from one entity to the another entity. There are two provisions, 15.1 and 23.1. 15.1 says to the subsidiary companies you can transfer. But the provision says that you have to be connected to the same ISTS point. So what is the point? The subsidiary first has to be a GNA grantee, and then because without GNA he can't have connectivity, and he has to have that connectivity at the same point. Then what is the purpose? It will not serve any purpose, because the purpose is that economical use of transmission network. If I have a GNA of 500 megawatt and my subsidiary needs 300 megawatt, I should be able to transfer it. There should not be any need to have a mandatory GNA by the subsidiary. If you permit connectivity standalone, the issue will be addressed. And similarly, under 23.1, they have permitted even non-subsidiary companies, third-party entities, to take additional GNA by transfer. But there also they have to be GNA grantees first. So what is the purpose? If I take a 1 megawatt GNA and then I can get a 200 megawatt GNA transferred from another company, then it makes the whole provision absurd, because why would I take a GNA if I can get it transferred and use it? The CTU will get its transmission charges by the company who is transferring. So these are some of the issues which, as Sir has rightly said, that the regulators, the legislators, they make the regulations, but there is lack of legal acumen, and they are not properly aligned with the provisions of the Act. So then the mismatch comes, and then obviously it is good for the lawyers, but there is a lot of ambiguities which creep in, which I think can be corrected. And one example, another I would give, is that the mismatch in transmission projects, which is a big issue right now, which is pending in Supreme Court now. So bids happened. After the bids, the Central Commission framed regulations that you have to pay bilateral transmission charges in case of a mismatch. Then they've amended the regulations now to reduce it to 50%. So now the question is, how can a transmission licensee give transmission charges to another transmission licensee? Because the Act says transmission charges are only for the service of open access. One transmission company does not take open access in another transmission company, if both are interstate transmission licensees. So here the issue of interpretation comes, because the TSA, the agreement says I have to only be liable for liquidated damages if I delay. Regulations come in later and they say no, in addition to the liquidated damages you pay transmission charges. So these are the regulatory uncertainties which needs to be resolved. The central government issued a 107 direction saying specifically these regulations should be amended and they should not be done. But it has not happened, and Central Commission has proceeded with these. So these are my preliminary observations, that there is a lot of ambiguity in how the rules or the regulations are framed. So this can be corrected maybe by slightly tweaking the Parent Act itself.
So are there any questions from the audience? Yeah, Soni, Mr. Soni.
Sir, there is no doubt the whole regulatory process has matured in the country. But there are a few things. The interpretation of each regulation and how one stakeholder will see is another aspect. But every draft regulation, every discussion paper which used to come over the years used to have EM, explanatory memorandum. And after hundreds of responses are there, then there used to be a SOR, statement of reasons. And then the final regulation used to come. So I have grown along with these. Reading SORs and EMs used to be a pleasure. And if I have read all of them, I have understood, then reading the regulation used to make totally a different interpretation than directly reading regulation. That's what I used to ask every operator, have you read EM and SOR, and show me from that. Nowadays what is happening, sir? There is an SOR, 120 responses on draft regulation, 110 responses, the response is not relevant, disposed of. So that way, sir, we do not read the mind of the regulator, that how he has arrived at. Now, sir, intricacies in this. By not mentioning why he has thought through like this and how he has arrived at it, he has hedged himself, regulator. Whereas in earlier days, quoting SOR and EM used to be a powerful thing because everything has to be read together. So I really don't know how to, express this. We can't even express in the public hearing. So I got an opportunity here. There is no law. There is no regulation for how to write SOR and EMs. I wish there was one. But sir, without that, we are not developing the culture. Now, I also appreciate, I've talked to so many staff also, regulators also. They don't have manpower, sir. So they have to come out with 30 page, 40 page. Somehow regulation is first written. SOR is coming after 4 months. There are many regulations which have come for which SOR is not there at all. And nobody is questioning that how without a statement of reason that regulation has come into force. The root cause of that is again manpower and things like that. I just thought that I'll express. I don't expect any response or concrete answer.
Yeah.
But this is an area of concern for those who have seen this.
Yeah, Sony, very relevant point because this is a part of the transparency. The transparency of the regulatory system also comes from the explanatory memorandum to the regulation, object and reason of the regulation, why the particular regulation approach has been adopted. Similarly, the orders also, the things should be properly analyzed, reasoned order and properly reasoned, so that you are able to understand the mind of the regulators and judges. So I think that's a very relevant point, and I have also found deterioration in this aspect of late. But at least Central Commission has given the object and reason and statement of explanatory memo. But state commissions, most of the state commissions are not given even that. So that becomes little non-transparent, whether they have considered all the suggestions and objections of the public.
Sir, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Can the state government do anything to state regulator who are not performing?
Can you?
Can a state government say anything or do anything in case a regulator is not performing?
No.
State. That'll have to be escalated to a writ court if a regulator is not performing mandatory functions that he's required to. Unfortunately, the Act does set out kind of a calendar of what he's supposed to do. And then under Article 227, supervisory jurisdiction, the High Court can give directions. But just to elaborate on what Mr. Nath and what Mr. Sanu was saying, after India became a republic on 26 January 1950, any new law as per a constitution has to be a codified law. So, of course, old legislation and old customary law will continue. Now, the effort, the time and effort that used to be spent earlier in putting together legislation was fairly intense. And over a period of time, what has happened is the need for new laws has become so much that the calendar, both of the legislature and parliament and, of course, delegated legislation has become so intense that a lot of the regulations and delegated regulations are just pushed through. I had the privilege of, working on the Sri Lankan legislation last summer. And, of course, there were some local draftspersons also that were involved. But in the end, it was very clear that person really didn't understand the sector. And that person's background as a legal draftsperson in the government was what, was the reason for that person to be involved. When I came in, and of course, a lot of experience in India, there are many recommendations that I made, and I sat down and I drafted quite a few things. Some of them were accepted, some were not accepted. But that rigor, it's very clear that I think it's just become a bit of a trend. I won't say trend, but it's just, I think, a lot of pressure on the draftspersons also to get things done quickly. And we see that a lot in customs, where notifications come in and further notifications come in to clarify, to reverse, because they're not being thought through the way they ought to be.
Answer your question, only tribunal has powers under section 121 to direct the commission to carry out their function. So if somebody, aggrieved person, files an application before tribunal that the such and such commission is not performing their function, then they can take.
So a state government needs to go to the tribunal to get
for example, 11 order I talked about, which Aptel gave, was on the letter received from Secretary Power, where they said that many states are not determining the tariff for last many years.
Yes.
And the distribution companies are in distress.
But do you have powers to sack that chap for not?
No, not sacking, only giving directions. So directions are generally followed. I think for a few years, I think things moved smoothly.
No, so what is worrying me now is, what I'm gathering in the last 2-3 sessions is, starting with Ghanshyamji, in fact I'm seeing Ghanshyamji is in a very different light now, is he wants to start a enforcement wing. And, you have these regulators, now you want to give the state regulators the powers as well to start enforcing things. I heard you got powers that you have at the Aptel level. So the state regulator faces a lot more political pressure. And I don't know whether it's a great idea to do this, because then you would have tons and tons of issues coming out of the way regulatory commissions behave. Of course, there are some regulators who are brilliant. Okay, there's no issue about it. They come from CEA or they come from a background where they understand power. But then when you have regulators who have worked in something nothing to do with power, for example, a marriage judge or from a marriage court of divorces and whatever, and he sits as a regulator, and then you explain to him, sir, mujhe GNA chahiye, ye chahiye, wo chahiye, looks up, looks down, doesn't know what you're talking about. Then depends on his staff to explain to him after this thing that this is what it means. We are in serious trouble. And then you want to give him enforcement powers, etc. So sorry.
There the staff plays a very important role. If you have a good staffing system, these things can be taken, because we have no control over appointment.
So now we go to the
whatever system you may devise for appointment of the committee members.
Yeah. So now we have 2 new problems.
There could be problems.
So no, sir, 2 new problems.
So if you have a strong staffing pattern, strong system, and we have suggested, you are not here.
No, I heard you, sir. Even I was outside, I'm hearing you, everything. What I'm saying is staff ka problem hai, everyone is saying they don't have enough staff, number 1. Number 2, they're saying they don't have competent staff. And there's a need for a regulatory staff, school, an academy to be set up. We're talking about 5-year, 10-year. In the meantime, what?
We have to just pull on.
We just have to follow the marriage rules.
Can I say something in praise of the regulators? We have been sitting here with all the regulators. May I give you my experience with regulators? Wonderful experience, I'll never forget. We were setting up a waste heat recovery plant in Assam, and I signed a power purchase agreement with the AACB. And then I had to get the tariff approved by AERC, Assam Electricity Regulatory. And they were so helpful, I cannot tell you. In fact, they guided me also, because that was the first time they were allowing a power purchase for a waste heat recovery plant. So I wanted some escalation clause. They said, Ashok, how shall we do it? And finally what they did, they agreed with me. They said, whatever the price of NTPC thermal plant, we will combine it there, link it there. If NTPC increases their price, tariff, from a thermal plant, we will also increase your price in the same way. It was excellent. So I had wonderful experience, and so all the regulators here, I'm full of praise for them. I know what you're saying.
No, I know what you mean. On the lighter side, you know what he did, sir? He used waste coal, which cost 60 rupees a ton, right?
Yeah.
And he was drawing from Coal India 3 rupees 50 paisa tariff, linking it to NTPC's price. The poor regulator didn't know what he'd done.
Coal washer he rejects. This was the coal washer.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Could you please pass on mic to Mr. Ghanshyam?
Yeah, I have the mic. I heard Mr. Sahai and the other expert there. My own experience while framing the policies or the rules when we were drafting, we draft normally because we are trying to solve an issue. As a technical experts, as a power sector experts, we do take inputs from all of them. But I do agree with Mr. Sahai that drafting errors are there. And drafting errors are checked by the legal people, not the technical people. So again, when we send it, I mean, that's my experience I'm just sharing with you. is whenever we make certain rules, etc., they go to legal department. There again, legal people only, they check it and they make all the corrections. And I tell you, a number of places, because they don't have the in-depth knowledge of the arises from that place. It's not the technical experts who are erring in the policy making. It's the legal people again is making a mistake. And I really say that, I mean, this is one part. Second is, let me share you another experience. When we are drafting electricity bill, we try to engage some legal firm as well, so that the draft becomes quite okay and all that. After 10, 15 iterations, because it takes huge amount of iterations. It is not that simply one iteration and finished, no. After 10 iteration, he said, boss, I'm done, I will not be able to support you at all. So that's the kind of support we get from the legal people.
Sir, can I just add on the lighter side? In your presentation, instead of HVDC, it was HDVC. No, don't be sorry. You have only proven the point that technical fellows don't look at the what was there. Now, having done that, if you are saying that legal wala bhi is not there, तो हम तो फंस गए. टेक्निकल वाला देखता नहीं है, लीगल वाला देखता नहीं, तो कहाँ जाएंगे?
टेक्निकल वाला देखता है, टेक्निकल वाला बहुत कोशिश करता है उसको ठीक करने की, बट अल्टीमेटली
फिर भी HDVC हो गया ना सर?
वो तो हो जाता है.
Now you are the top person in India. और आपकी प्रेजेंटेशन में होगा, मतलब टेक्निकल वाले ने किया होगा आपके स्टाफ ने किसी.
Anyway, that's on the lighter side. Second part that I just wanted to mention is mostly why this framework was developed. Let's understand this. Why we separated electricity sector from the normal legal courses, not going through the High Court and other places. The main reason was it is a sector which is technical driven. And somebody with understanding of the subject only can really resolve the issues. But mostly what has happened now, it gets again entangled into the legalities. Mostly you will find whether it is in CRC or a Reptel or anywhere, it has again started getting entangled into the legalities part of it. And that is how these things are not getting resolved. Again, we have come back to the same old system of getting it delayed in the High Court process, etc., etc., etc. I'm sorry to say this, but this is what practically has started happening. I'll quote you an example which is really proving very, very detrimental to the development of RE, and that is the GIB case, which is still lying in the Supreme Court. Huge amount of impact in the development of renewables. Nothing to do with the technicalities. Technical report has also been sidelined. So I think these are some of the things which also legal people have to look at it.
No, let me just address this at a philosophical level. The legal department of the Ministry of Power goes to the Law Ministry. And of course I engage with them regularly. The only questions they ask are, what is your experience in arbitration? So simply because a person is a lawyer, I mean, he's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, we are specialists in this sector. Some other lawyer from a high court will not even understand a word of what we say in court. So I think simply because some legal person has looked at it is inadequate. And by the same token, if I may submit with all humility.
वहाँ problem क्या होती है?
No, the bureaucracy is I'm not commenting on the bureaucracy. That is an issue.
Draft check करता है, he checks for all the departments.
Let it be. The quality of legal drafting in the Law Ministry. Forget about specialized areas like ours. Forget about Electricity Act. Even the general drafting levels are so poor. Number one. Number two, with all humility, if I start doing the job of a chartered accountant and vice versa, we'll never come up with a perfect solution. So to take your example, I worked with you on some parts of the bill. I mean, it was a great experience for me because I was learning from you with that World Bank assignment when we were doing all the franchising clauses. I think, we did the best that we could in conjunction with you people. So I'm not even for a moment taking credit saying I did all the drafting. A lot of people try and do that. Similarly, the technical people, their inputs need to be technical. Ultimately, it translates into a document which has to be tested legally. That is the system we have. That's what we've inherited from the Act. Either we simply say that, sorry, no lawyers will be allowed, forget about the legal aspects, forget about the contracts, the interpretation will be done on pure technical and techno-commercial basis. So be it. But we don't have that system. We have contracts, we have PPAs, we have other agreements for the simple reason the banks look at it. In the end, there is a legality involved in each step, in addition to the technical inputs. Combining them harmoniously, which means getting the right set of expertise on both sides working together, not in isolation. That's one solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that.
Another suggestion is that if the draft is circulated to stakeholders and their comments are taken, then I think many things can be taken care of.
Okay.
Definitely all these are done, sir. I mean, all the stakeholder consultations are already done.
Sir, since you are now the person helping us out understand the complex ecosystem of power, I want to draw your attention to the Solicitor General of India sending a notification in the year 2011 or 12, the late Ghulam Vahanvati, saying that over 1 megawatt does not need regulation, right? Coincidentally, I met the gentleman concerned in London 2 months later. And then another opinion was given, no. They have the power if they want to regulate or something like that, very vague thing. They can regulate over 1 megawatt, but the Act is very clear under 42 subsection 5 or something, that over 1 megawatt, it doesn't need regulation. Now the immediate reaction of this legal tamasha, if I can call it that, was Rajasthan told the ESCOMs कि बाबा कल से तुम अपना power का procurement करो, we are not going to this thing. So they went and told the industries कि boss arrange for your own power 1 megawatt and above. We have no authority and we will not arrange power for you. So there was panic. This was withdrawn. This was discussed, and a lot of the people sitting here are aware of it. This was discussed in various regulatory forums. Do we or don't we have the authority to regulate anybody who is 1 megawatt and above as per the Act? Aaj tak, and I'm being, I've reached a stage where I have nothing to lose or to gain. I'm just sharing something with you where, being an observer over the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, I've realized that there are a lot of these exciting things happening which are just forgotten. Nobody has clarified to me that is 1 megawatt and above to be regulated or not, and are those regulations or those tariff orders that are being passed for, say, a guy who's 2 megawatts or 5 megawatts, are they valid in law?
Mr. Harry,
I think उसमें क्या था?
Let me answer.
उसमें 1 megawatt जो है, 1 megawatt is for section 42 का. You are rightly referring to that clause. This is for the open.
I didn't hear you.
This is for the open access, right? But read the lines properly, and that is how in the rules now we have said 5 years has already gone by. It is supposed to be 5 years is also mentioned there, and that is how now we have reduced and facilitated even for the lower end consumers up to 100 kilowatt. So you have to see in a positive aspect of those lines that has been read there.
So are you saying regulatory commissions can't regulate even 100 kW?
See, they are allowed to take open access.
I think
it does not mean that.
I think open access is an option given to the consumer. It is not that all 1 megawatt and above consumers have to arrange their own power from after completion of 5 years. It is an option given to them. If somebody wants, then if somebody, for some consumers of more than 1 megawatt,
you're a regulator.
So he can opt to arrange open access.
Understood.
Yeah.
He wants to respond.
What Harry sir is saying is, if you read the provision, it says above 1 megawatt shall have the right to open access, which the Ghulam Vahanvati's opinion, I think, was in line with the Act, that above 1 megawatt, the regulator should have no role. and the USO of the DISCOM should be restricted to 1 megawatt. Every 1 megawatt plus consumer should be allowed to mandatorily arrange his own power. So that interpretation also comes from 42.2, but that has not been carried forward.
I mean, mandatorily word is make to use नहीं किया हुआ है.
No. It says it shall have 1 megawatt and above shall have to take open access. It is not an option. If you read the provision carefully, what Harry sir is saying, that is a possible interpretation, which Mr. Ghulam Bhanwati also gave. So it is a matter of interpretation.
But you have to read it with respect to the other sections as well. And if you do a harmonious, what you also called it as a harmonious reading, then DISCOMs do have a liability to service consumers.
This is exactly what we are saying. As lawyers, we revel in this because it gives us more business, right? I'll give you another example.
You want business.
I'll give you another example. What has the Supreme Court interpreted the captive rules? Even in a company, they say that proportionality has to be there. By the way, it has to be plus minus 10% on a continuous basis. Now, I think
this is where the things go wrong.
No. I think what the point I'm making is, I think the role of the ministry is to step in and sort out some of those things. You know,
I mean,
clearly, Supreme Court has said it because only the DISCOMs are available in front of the Supreme Court. No consumer, they chose not to be there. I mean, that's a mistake. Fair enough. But isn't this a blatantly wrong interpretation that the proportionality of a shareholder, I can understand cooperative society, it was clear. Now, a shareholder can only take power to the extent of a shareholding in that captive. And by the way, he has to maintain it throughout the year. Is it even possible?
That is where I say, I mean, we have to...
If you read this provision, it says State Commission shall not later than 5 years from the date of commencement of the electricity regulations provide such open access to all consumers who require a supply of electricity where the maximum power is made available at a time exceed 1 megawatt.
Who requires?
So it is not compulsion. It's not mandatory.
अगर choice हो तो आप regulate क्यों कर रहे हो?
It is the choice of the consumer.
Sir, ठीक है, choice of the consumer है. How can you regulate his choice?
No. In case he opts for this open access option, then his tariff will not be regulated.
Obviously, but you can't. But the port chap can't do anything because now you put additional surcharge, you put electricity duty, you put wheeling charges. वो बेचारा तो मर गया. 3 रुपए की बिजली पे 4 रुपए आप लगा रहे हैं ऊपर, तो कहाँ से बेचारा ओपन एक्सेस करेगा? Kancham, don't laugh. It's a serious issue, यार. बहुत serious issue है ये. Anyway, talking about captive. Hemant Sahai and I sat down and I think spent 7 days on reading. It says to set up. The word is set up captive power plant. If you remember that discussion, 1 week we spent. What do you mean by set up? Set up can be a structure. It doesn't say we have to build a building. It doesn't say you have to install a machinery. But उसपे पता नहीं क्या हुआ, उसका क्या interpretation था, sir?
I think there now decisions have come on that, and even an existing captive plant can be
clarified that the setup does mean for the setup.
Sir, mic दे दो. Yes, Eamon.
Yeah, so this captive judgment, I was part of that judgment. I represented Tamil Nadu Power Producers Association. So one fundamental error which the Supreme Court, according to me, has done, and we have filed a review, is they have come out with a unitary method. Like 1.96 times you can consume power. So if I have a shareholding of 52%, then I have to consume 100%, then only it will come out. Suppose I have a 60% shareholding captive. Into 1.96 goes above 100%. How will you implement the captive structure? So what had happened before Supreme Court was that the DISCOM, I won't name the lawyer because he's a very well-respected lawyer, a senior advocate. So the Supreme Court took the sheet from the DISCOM's lawyer and just copied, pasted it. And the illustrations, the 5 illustrations which come in, they are from that sheet, which makes it impractical, completely impractical. Only 5 scenarios in each illustration are taken, and a unitary method of 1.96 is applied. No, so 52% is the maximum shareholding which you can have, because it is completely nonsensical. So during the hearing, Justice Khanna said that you have to gross it down to 26%, then you apply unitary method, then it is perfect. But that grossing down is not there. So if you have a shareholding above 53% or 52% into 1.96, it goes beyond 100%. 100% beyond 100% you can't generate. So how can you consume? So these are the practical difficulties. One more difficulty which I would suggest is that there is a thing called regulatory jurisprudence. Is a fight between regulatory and civil jurisprudence. I will give you a very small example. What had happened is that it was a Section 63 tariff adoption petition is filed. Under Section 62 and 63 both are equal as per Supreme Court's HVDC judgment. Now under 62 everything is approved at the tariff approval stage when the tariff is determined. Under Section 63, once the DISCOM is, and this is about an RE project. So DISCOM is coming for adoption, SECI is coming for adoption. The generator said there are certain change in law events, you please in principle approve it. The commission said no, you are a respondent and a respondent cannot ask relief in the petition filed by the DISCOM. So here comes civil jurisprudence versus regulatory jurisprudence. If you follow, because under 62 everything is approved at one level. In 63 they say you file a separate petition. So now the solar developer or so what assurance he gets? He wanted an in principle approval so that the lenders are sure about its recovery and they fund the project. So these are the difficulties which have to be overcome, maybe by creating institutes and training people which can be appointed as even legal members. Because technical, I don't see a problem, because technical people come, they know this, they know how to, provide the solution. The legal member has to interpret the law properly in that fashion. So there has to be complete gelling, otherwise there would be ambiguities.
Oh, since there are no more questions, can we end? Oh, there is. Soni Saab, of course. How can we forget you? Mic for Soni Saab.
Sir, this conference is AI-generated power conference. So with so many luminaries, I want to know what is the role of AI in Indian regulatory space. By the way, I push every regulation and every order of interest through AI and try to understand how it has understood. There are very interesting results it throws. So I am just trying to see if there is some institution getting built, or are the regulators thinking in that line, and what the lawyers are thinking in that line. Thank you.
Before the lawyers respond, I can give you my vision, if I may. This conference is AI powered because every word that we say is being recorded, is interpreted, and you'll get the summation, etc., etc. But you got so many lakh cases pending in court. Can you imagine if you fill up your application? My lawyer friends won't be happy to hear this. You fill up the application in a certain format and you send it in. The judgment comes to you in 15 minutes. That's what's going to happen in future. The judge will be a bot because the law is clear, the case laws are clear, he is able to pick up the interpretation and you'll get your judgment. Over to the lawyers.
Yes and no. I think we're still miles away from there because even ChatGPT and the other AI, software, they are also learning. I think the certain kinds of lawyers will become obsolete for sure, but a dynamic sector where changes are happening every day, not only because of law, but because of technology, because of newer initiatives. I think there'll be a role for an arbiter and, of course, practitioners like ourselves.
I completely agree because sometimes we have seen so many times that even Supreme Court judgments are reversed. So a judgment is a view, it's an opinion of the person sitting on the chair. So that cannot be predicted by AI. So there would always be a role for someone thinking out of the box. So there would be a role for lawyers.
So let me end the session on a lighter note by quoting a conversation I had with a very eminent person in the power sector who said, Harry Saab, मैं तो frustrate हो गया. I said, what happened? अरे यार, lawyers को समझ में नहीं आता electricity issues. I said, okay, I understand. उसके ऊपर, the judges don't understand what the lawyer is saying on the electricity issues. How do I get justice? Where do I go? My humble submission to this house is, these are very rare commodities. To get a lawyer who's been around for 15 years, 20 years in the power sector is a very rare commodity. And I think we need to give them a round of applause for coming here. And of course, to the chairman of our session, the ever young, ever growing, ever green, Mr. Rakesh Nath. A round of applause.
The one incident I tell you, our chairperson who was an ex-Supreme Court judge, she said settling the matter in the tribunal was more difficult, electricity matter, than settling the matters in the Supreme Court, civil matters and criminal matters.
I agree with her. I agree with her. It's very difficult. किसी को समझ में नहीं आता है sir, क्या करेगा? Okay, on that happy note, guys, we're going to the upper deck for the next 2 sessions. Upper deck, please. Chai, pani, everything is upstairs. And let's enjoy the open air as we discuss and take a change. फिर बोलो क्या करना है? Ladies and gentlemen, there's a change. Hello. We're going to continue one more session here. We've sent out special troops to fight the mosquitoes upstairs. So we're going to do it here. The next session, please. May I request Mr. Chintan Shah to join us, Mr. Arun Mahesh Babu, Managing Director of GPCL and UGVC, and Bhuvan Mehta, Lead Energy Strategy Group Adani, to join us, please. Yeah, he's here. Oh. Huh?
What about the session after that? General Panu, has he come? No. General Panu. Then we can what you asking for? So we finish all the sessions.
Please come. Hi. Bhuvan, come. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. This is the most exciting session. It's going to change the nature of India's energy security. Yeah. Spread out. So we're going to discuss something. Gulrez, can I ask for help? Can you go out and tell them that we're all here? Tell them to come back. So we're going to discuss something very new and very exciting. My president, Mr. Ashok Das Gupta, has suggested we should merge the session. So I'm going to request General Panu to also join us, and Navneet Singh, founder Kepler Aerospace, to join us as well. General Sahib, you can bring your chai with you, no issue.
Thank you, Harry. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Harry. This session, we have actually combined two sessions together, the hydrogen session and the advanced space technologies session together. So I'll just have the opening remarks over here and hand it over to General Punu. We discussed about and we talked about hydrogen yesterday also, even today. So hydrogen is going to be the next game changer in the entire energy conundrum across the world. That's for sure. The question is when. Maybe 2030s, 2035, but that's bound to happen. And the reason is that, renewables essentially can get into the main energy spectrum. Also mentioned it yesterday that, the electricity only constitutes about 17% of the total energy demand of India. In case of US, it's 26%. So that means the rest is primary and secondary energy. So always this question was, how do you electrify more and more? And the reason is that, how do you essentially replace the fossil fuels or essentially get an alternative for that? This was always a question. Hydrogen actually gives a solution. It's a Swiss knife. And it is making possible because falling prices of renewables across the world. We've been seeing a very typical curve in solar where the prices have reduced like the last 10 years like anything, and it's likely to continue for the future also, with a lot of material research happening, efficiency improvement happening. We're also seeing about a PERSCO-wide technology in solar. We're essentially talking about 27%, 28% efficiency levels at a module side. Just to give you an economic law. Now, at laboratory level, people have gone up to 27%. And now we have tandem cells. That means you have a cell, above that there's another cell, multiple cells. So you can actually go to an efficiency level, theoretically, to the tune of 45 to 50%. We are at 21% today. So you're talking about a massive activity happening on the research side on solar, which obviously will reflect into cost of electricity. And there have been massive innovation going across the world. One particular innovation which has happened in both as well as US and China is a solar cell can now store a photon. That means it can release this photon in the night. So the whole question of solar, which has been always been a question, कि रात को क्या करेंगे? Can still generate electricity because the photon is stored in the cell itself. All this is at laboratory level right now. But going forward maybe 10 years down the line, these technologies will be made available commercially. So entire game is getting changed. So one thing is for sure, prices are going to fall further. The expected price for solar is something like 1 rupees per kilowatt hour in India, somewhere about 8-9 years down the line. And because hydrogen constitutes 60% of the cost coming from the energy side, it has a straight implication in the hydrogen economy. At the same time, the cost of extracting oil and gas is going up across the world. So a time will come where essentially the switch will happen on a commercial basis. That's the reason that most of the governments across the world have been rolling out subsidies, incentives, tax benefits for pushing green hydrogen. So this is the future. There's no doubt about it. Oil and gas companies are very keen to get into green hydrogen. It's as simple as that because they would like to dovetail their oil and gas spectrum towards petrochemicals instead of energy vertical. That means it's expansion business for them, as simple as that. And the best part about hydrogen is you don't need an oil well. You can essentially generate wherever you want it. That's another advantage which will have a huge implication on geopolitical. That's what's going to happen. These are things which is happening. Obviously, Government of India is rolling out a major program for hydrogen. There are a lot of private sector companies announced very robust targets essentially towards hydrogen. The official estimate of the Government of India or target is 5 million tons of hydrogen, which is like something like 125 gigawatt of renewables. But if you add actually the announcement happened by various private sector and all, it comes to something like 7.5 to 10 million tons of hydrogen. We're talking 200 to 250 gigawatt of renewables capacity only for hydrogen. The advantage, as I said yesterday also, is hydrogen ultimately is a derivative, and then finally you either produce ammonia or methanol, or any other product. Interestingly, both ammonia and methanol are dollar-linked products. It's market-determined prices. The advantage with renewables is, since there's no fuel cost involved, one can actually borrow money, both equity and debt in dollar terms, because the end product is also dollar determined. That also reduces the cost of electricity to 60 paisa to 70 paisa, because you don't require hedging. As simple as that. So that's the reason renewables going to be a major disruptor in the hydrogen economy in the future. Third most important part is, since the fuel is not there, we'll have a long-term price contract coming in the hydrogen side, which doesn't exist today in oil and gas at all. Oil and gas maximum fixed rate contract is 3 years. But in renewables, since I can predict the cost of hydrogen for the next 25 years, I can actually enter into a fixed rate contracts, which is again going to be a disruptor in the oil and gas sector. So we'll see a fair amount of change. Markets, as I said, is massive. As I said, right now we are just penetrating 5 to 6%, maybe 7% of total electricity spectrum, which is constitute only 16 to 17% of the energy spectrum. Rest entire thing of 74% of primary and secondary energy becomes a market space for green hydrogen. So it's amazingly, I would say, if you're asking me what is the potential for green hydrogen in India, I would say something in the vicinity of like 4,000 to 5,000 gigawatts minimum. If you want to essentially go totally carbon neutral, replace oil and gas, coal and all. This is going to be a very, very busy space in the future. And yes, fair amount of innovation is going to get into it. The biggest crux today happens to be electrolyzer. Because you need to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. So that is something which is sort of a constraint across the world, just not in India. And a fair amount of manufacturing unit for electrolyzer will come in. Ammonia is not much of an issue because ammonia is something tried and tested for 100 years. Everybody knows how to manage ammonia, how to store ammonia. That's not a problem. And apart from this, there's a huge amount of potential of creating green hydrogen from biomass, which is something which is right now not well documented, but it's bound to happen. For example, almost all bioethanol units in India coming from bioethanol manufactured from either molasses or from food grain, one of the byproduct is CO2. Now, CO2 combined with hydrogen can make methanol. So we have another source of revenue stream which is going to happen in the future for green methanol itself. So these are something which is happening, and I think, and India has a major role over here. Very simple, because India has the entire ecosystem to set up renewables. So any country which has got this ecosystem to create renewables is an ideal country to also make green hydrogen. That means we are limited to few countries: US, China, parts of Europe, and India. Because we have the ecosystem to deploy money, we have the manpower, we have the processes to adopt more and more renewables. For example, Saudi Arabia is also like to push green hydrogen, but Saudi Arabia does not have the ecosystem for renewables. So that's where we are placed today. And I would like to open up this this panel for discussion, and I'll also handle the mic to General Punu to moderate this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jai Hind. I think in this room it's the last session, and yesterday I finished a 3-day event on space. And our last session was at 7 o'clock. I mean, it finished at 7 o'clock, it started at 6. So the panel here was looking at me and I was looking at them, and everybody was looking at each other. So we addressed those people sitting in the room as diehards. And we also said now that we are going to tell the secret, and it is best that the secret should be known only to few. And I find there are about 35 people sitting here and 5 people talking to them. I think the ratio is good, that all the secrets should only be known to few and those to diehards. I like the word retreat. I think this is my 8th retreat. And I also like the word shunya. And you come to shunya for a retreat, and I also like the word net shunya mission. And I think we are going to achieve it here because nowhere else we can achieve this. Because this gives us all the environment which we are trying to save, because all that we are going to talk about is saving the environment. And I think this gives us the right environment that when you come here, you realize that this is the desirable environment that you want to live in. And when we go back to say, hey, lekin, wo retreat chahiye hame, and we all then would work towards getting green energy, reduce the, all the carbons or whatever, try to achieve shunya emissions. The discussions that I have seen here have been very peaceful. No loud talk, no argument, no discussion which is loud, very peaceful. I think that is what retreat brings us to. But the problem is that hydrocarbons have created a problem for all of us. Most of the wars are fought on energy. I remember my senior General Ashok Mehta sitting here. In 1981, we used to sit and discuss in a place called Dhana, where he was a brigade commander. The Iran-Iraq war was on oil in Shat al-Arab. And we used to keep talking about why are they killing each other? The oil is still there. I mean, have a discussion and sort it out. No, it is common, so they must do whatever. Kuwait happened the same way. And ultimately, one day, the Americans came to India and told us, would you join us to fight in Iraq? And why would India join to fight the United States in Iraq? So we kept saying, we can, but why should we? Because converting the advantage, blood to energy, I thought we will only spill our blood, but we will not get energy from them. Because Saddam Hussein will not give it to you. Even if you kill him, it will all go to the Americans. So we will only shed our blood, but this energy will go somewhere else. Also, the background to our partition, really in 1945, the first time people understood the power of nuclear energy was in destruction. And imagine the first nuclear test was done in July 45, and it was used in August, 6th August 1945. This is recorded, that you're having the first test in July and you are actually using an atom bomb in Japan on 6th of August. And people saw the devastation. And that is where the whole nuclear understanding was disarmament, control, regulate. It's a bad word. That is the time when, after Second World War, India was to be partitioned or to be made independent, but it got partitioned in a manner that the great game was unfolding, and India had no idea what the great game is all about. The great game was all about energy. In Exaichen area, the Russians were looking at uranium. The British had drawn a couple of lines in Exaichen. One of them was Johnson Line. Another one was this line, Foreign Office line, a number of names there, and they would war game. How much should we allow the Chinese to come in? And how much more deep should we go in and control this territory ourselves? And they realized that in the Second World War, they have not, or they will not have the residual combat power to hold on to the Indian territory. And therefore they settled for the Chinese to come and occupy that gap so that the Russians could not come. So the Russians were also interested that the British should not come into Tibet. Because if they come into Tibet, the Western world will have the access to all the nuclear material, uranium at that time they were talking about. So therefore imagine the two powers to be then, Russians wanting the Chinese to throw the British influence out and go into Tibet, and the British wanting the Chinese to come in to keep the Russians away. And that is how India got partitioned, where Exaichen went with the Chinese because the Foreign Office line was much closer to the LAC where we have it today. And the entire excise chain went there, and Indian troops, of course, were British troops at that time. So India could not do anything because the British were controlling our military. What happened in Pakistan was Gilgit-Baltistan was an area from where the British wanted to have a listening post for the Russian nuclear experimentation. They put listening posts at all the places, including at K2. And therefore, when India was to be partitioned, they very conveniently gave Gilgit-Baltistan to Pakistan, and Pakistan occupied Kashmir, became a continuum of that, and it was Queen of England who was also Queen of Pakistan till 1956. Pakistan's first constitution was written in 1961. We became a republic in 1950. What was holding them back? Why could not they write a constitution? Because the British wanted a constitution to be written the way they wanted it, as part of the Great Game. Ultimately, 1961 constitution was also not, it did not take birth. Ultimately, the constitution of Pakistan came up only in 1973, after Bangladesh had already been separated out as East Pakistan after 71 war. So really speaking, on one side, you have the Indian Ocean where 70 to 80% of the energy which gets imported by Chinese goes through the sea lines of communication which come from the Gulf, goes into the Indian Ocean, the bottlenecks of various straits of Malacca and whatever. And on the other side, to give a pushback, the Americans come back and name Indian Ocean as Indo-Pacific, because it is Indo-Pacific where now the British, later on, the Western theories applied by the Americans came to say, let's push Indians into this because ultimately they will help us in achieving this blockade. Today, what is happening? Today, the access to Red Sea, by and large, is not available to us because the proxies of Iran and proxies of China are sitting there as Houthis and doing whatever they want to do, piracy, hijack, do whatever action, fire missiles or guns or whatever they have. The Chinese ships are not being targeted. The Chinese ships are not being targeted. Israel is fighting with Hamas because there was an Abraham Accord and we were to build IMEC corridor, and IMEC corridor was supposed to have energy corridor and all the trade and money and the energy and money exchange was to happen. The Arab Spring came up only because of energy problem. Saddam Hussein is gone, Colonel Gaddafi has gone. Ultimately, when they went to Syria, the Russians were there. They said, no more. Your Arab Spring should stop here. Ultimately, this is what, when we talk about a very peaceful discussion, actually the world is at war because of energy, because of the nuclear understanding of making a bomb out of it. So therefore, all the regulators are coming in to talk about, you can't do this, nuclear supply group, and you are regulated and you are controlled, and you will not have access to the materials. Even if you have access to the material, but you can't do it this way or that way, and the lawyers and the advocates of the world, they are trying to push India to a spot that we should not get access to the material. Now, the world is crying. The world is crying because there is something called emissions. And we have a problem that the world is facing global warming. One theory says, whatever you do today, I'm sorry I'm taking a little more time, but it will build a contest for us to discuss. What you do today to go green or whatever emissions are being added to our modern living, today what you do will have an impact after 29 years. It means this year what you do, the impact will happen only after 29 years. If you do wrong, the wrong will actually start showing up after 29 years. If you do good today, it will only show after 29 years. So therefore, if we have to reverse the global warming, we have only 10 years window. Because after 10 years, we are going into a cycle which is irreversible. By 2070, we will have
the entire desertification of agriculture, of farms. And that means that we will have no food to eat when the world is actually heading towards 10 billion. And on the other side, because of the problems that we have created for ourselves, we will have no food to eat. Imagine the kind of conflict that will get generated. So therefore, as far as space is concerned, somebody has come up with an idea. Let's go to L1, where the gravity of sun and earth become a null, where we have sent Aditya today. And we build a huge frame, and having number of such objects put together and make a mesh out of it, which would be called a solar shield. And it will prevent the heat coming from the sun to the earth by whatever factor. And over a period of time, the earth will start repairing itself in next 10 years. This is preventive. Another thing that needs to be done, they say, is go for clean nuclear energy, but don't have centrifuges and you don't have those rods there. You use a different technology, but make reactors in the ocean. And you have these reactors either put on a barge or have a ship itself, as Harry was talking about, that how can a submarine be nuclear powered? So you have a power plant which is floating. But how that energy will come to the surface is a matter that is in debate. And of course, you know, whatever you were talking about, biodegradable, you know, you can convert a lot of energy. Now, if you are going to make the hydrogen, green hydrogen, the electrolyzers have got a technology, and those electrolyzers got to be available to us in a manner that the green hydrogen is affordable. Unless green hydrogen is affordable, we are not going to switch. So we have to give a cleaner but more affordable energy. And I think that is where we are going. In the space conference that we've had just now, we are talking about, it is Upar wala sab dekhta hai. We can see the earth in remote sensing. We can see that how we are losing the green belts. We are seeing how the earth color is changing. We are actually storing data by which you can now understand and analyze and predict how much farm or how much agriculture or how many green pastures we are losing. And I think that is something which is very dangerous. Also, we can have sensors, which we were talking about, Navneet can talk more about it, that we can find out where the emissions are. We can talk about where the carbon footprint is. We can control that, we can regulate it, we can monitor it, we can punish or reward based on that. So I suppose from space we can do a lot, but we spoke about swap. Swap is size, weight and power. Power is required to run a satellite because that gives the maneuverability. You can change the orbit of the satellite, and whatever happens obviously got to be transmitted. It is the electromagnetic spectrum which is going to be used, but also there will be electromagnetic pulse which will get generated. So when we talk about electromagnetic field, we are also talking about electric, because unless it is powered, there will be no emission. There will be no RF. You can't do anything about it. So more and more we talk about anything, ultimately it comes to power, energy, and go clean but have more. So we have only two options: go cleaner and have more and more electricity. Because in the modern world, if you're going to, I had gone to Maratha Center with General Mehta, and I took him to show our horses. And then we had a trophy, and I told him that this is Sharkat. The body is of a lion and the head is of a human. So I said it means that the power and a combination of a man and a beast can never be subjugated. Today, that synergy has to be created, that we are so dependent in our modern life on energy. If the energy goes, the life goes. So ultimately, that is what we got to do. We've got to have neater, cheaper, and more energy for our survival. Otherwise, same energy, non-availability of wrong use of energy like the EMP will kill all of us. Thank you, and I think we can have whoever the next speaker wants to play in this. You're most welcome. Navneet, would you want to take the field? Sure. Okay, thank you.
So, first I would like to thank General Panu for waking everybody up. Such booming voice, we can harness that power itself to get ourselves cleaner. But now, coming to the point, space is actually the first place where we have switched completely to renewable energy. In space, I don't have coal power plants. I don't have, windmills. I depend on solar power. I depend on, funnily, green hydrogen. We depend on green hydrogen because the biggest rockets in the world are launched with hydrogen as fuel. Actually, the biggest rockets in the world are cleaner than your car because they use hydrogen and oxygen. When they combine, they spew water. So yeah, that itself is an anachronism or a definition of irony. But that is how space has been. The major satellite power generating systems are always solar or nuclear. We use RTGs, which use radioactive decays to produce power. Back in the 80s and 90s, in those crazy Cold War days, we had people launching nuclear reactors into space. That was quite fun till they started crashing down on Earth. Canada had a very great day once when a Soviet satellite came and crashed all over them and released nuclear waste all over the countryside. So yes, one of my panelists was talking about increasing efficiencies of solar panels, which is a great endeavor in itself. In space, we do work at 33 to 34% efficient power panels because, again, satellites are small, but we need a lot of power, as General Panu clearly said. How do you generate power in a small satellite? You generate power by utilizing extremely expensive quadruple junction, triple junction solar cells. So I don't know what you pay per watt on the ground, but I pay 6,000 rupees per watt in space. Right? That is the price of getting a solar panel that will last you 15 years without failing. And even then, I do have to consider my, power generation from the beginning and the power generation after 15 years. So when I'm designing a system for space use, I do not think that my system is generating, say, 100 watts at the satellite launch time. It'll be generating 30 watts in 15 years. So my system can only take 25 watts when I'm launching the system. Right? So that is the kind of energy recovery and energy planning that I have to do for my space systems. So, I can understand your issues well. So now coming to how exactly can we in the space sector help the power sector? So one of the biggest issues that I have seen, having been attending the events today, one of the issues that has been raised has been power prediction, power usage prediction, and power generation prediction, especially for green energy systems. We all love solar, but solar does not like clouds. We all love wind energy, but wind energy also requires wind. We all love pumped hydro, we all love hydroelectric, but we also need to know real-time status of water levels for such systems. This is where space comes into play. By utilizing next generation of sensors and a defined clusterized approach to constellation satellites, we can provide such solutions to green energy companies. Satellites in formation, satellites in clusters can provide hyper-local weather information. I'm not talking Indian Meteorology Service ka one-in-a-day bulletcast or half-a-day bulletin. I'm talking hyper-local, immediate information on upcoming weather patterns for A, power generation, B, power usage prediction in certain areas that can help our power generators, DISCOMs, and transmission companies manage effectively by avoiding load shedding and other issues that usually happen whenever there is a natural phenomena or say there are floods, or say if you have an impending warning of massive floods in an area or massive rain in an area or cloud cover in an area that can help you plan your overall power generation and transmission and storage pipeline as we go ahead. So that is point one. Point two is utilization of such sensors, such as plume detection sensors, such as, green energy and greenhouse emission gas detection sensors in space to formalize carbon credit utilization. So many companies are offering carbon credits now for their green energy initiatives. How do you actually monitor such systems? By utilizing greenhouse emitting sensors in space that allow you to track in real time. If a company says, I'm going to give you carbon credits, are they actually utilizing it correctly? How much are they actually emitting and how much is it being offset by your market value? That allows you to create your own market, that allows you to set up a price, and that allows you to plan in the future the requirements for your green energy credits. So these are a couple of points where I think space can be very, very useful when it comes to green energy monitoring as well as green energy production. And as a person working in the Indian space sector, I really look forward to collaborating with the Indian power sector soon. Thanks.
Taking over from aerospace, I think the solar system's largest RE park is happening in Gujarat. Actually, the world's largest, but there's nothing happening in the solar system otherwise. And we have Arun Babu, who is essentially the MD of the nodal institution of the government of Gujarat, which is spearheading this Khavda RE park. It's a very unique concept. As you know that the major challenge with renewables happens to be land. We require a huge amount of tracts of lands and land. And Gujarat government identified a place in Khavda, which is bordering Pakistan, which is essentially nothing but, they call it in Gujarati Run, which is nothing but desert, and it's an arid area. And this entire activity has been shifting to setting up wind and solar projects there. And CTU has been working very closely to draw the transmission lines over there. Khavda has another unique feature. We are very, very close to ports, both Kandla as well as Mundra. So it's also becoming a perfect ecosystem to also manufacture green hydrogen. And that's what GPSL is also doing. It's a nodal ministry for the hydrogen in Gujarat. So Gujarat is going to be the major powerhouse. It's already a powerhouse in terms of energy side because you have the largest refinery of the world in Gujarat by Reliance Industries. And now with hydrogen coming over here is going to be the center space in the entire energy spectrum as far as India is concerned. And I'll hand it over to Arun Babu. If you can just give us a narrative about what's happening over there. And one more thing, we are also from UGVCL. So Gujarat is also one of the pioneer states for rooftop solar, residential. And this is one particular state where the distribution company is pushing residential rooftop. So much so that if you actually call up any UGVCL employee or a PGVCL employee, the ringtone that happens is solar lagao. So I would also like you to also cover up what economics you see as a distribution company to push more and more rooftop solar. Because we've been seeing yesterday also, there is a resistance, so-called resistance by distribution company to promote rooftop solar. While in Gujarat it's exactly the opposite. So that learning would also help. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful introduction that was thrown out by you. I was just wondering how it's going to be difficult to be a part of the last session. Thank you to Harry, sir, for just being so kind to give this opportunity and the stage to be here in this wonderful retreat. And I'm sure General Pannu is also the high-pitched voice which we put up here. I was wondering how we're going to catch up with the kind of deposition he had put up. Thanks to you for the wonderful introduction on the new technologies of space and hydrogen. So thanks for being in Shunya retreat. I'm sure the army can relate more on how the beaching retreat translates into energy retreat right now at this place. Having said that, I represent Gujarat here. So being the Managing Director of Gujarat Power Corporation and also the Managing Director of the Northern Gujarat Discom, which is basically Ahmedabad based. I would just throw some light on the discussions which was happening. Meanwhile, we're talking about energy. My good friend Navneet took it to space. So now I think I have to come down to the ground from space to relate it on how exactly it is being done out there. For having said that matter, GPCL is presently the nodal agency and the corporation who is involved in the development of the world's largest hybrid solar wind park, which would be generating about 30,000 megawatts of energy in just say 3 years from now. We have already, it is to give a brief, it is exactly on the run of Kutch in a place called Khavda, which is adjoining the international border from Pakistan. You would be surprised that with the help of the army, we could also navigate and create a new ecosystem there, which was previously uninhabited open space. So which was, and talking about space, this park in 3 years' time would be visible from space. That's what is being expected, the size of it. To your surprise, we have already charged about 500 megawatt of RE power into the grid. So even morning when I was listening and having the CEA chairman here, we should also be discussing on how the network transmissions are being done so faster. With companies like PGCIL and C2IL putting up 765 kV lines, we also have private transmission players who are also involved in developing lines for about 100 kilometers in 6 months. So that is an amazing transition that is being seen. In terms of Khavda, we are planning for 30,000 megawatts of electricity. Transmission lines through the C2IL lines, there are about 6 parallel lines that is going to be coming out from Khavda, which would eventually be reaching out to places like Bhuj Pooling Station and Lakhadia Pooling Station, which will go into the ISTS lines in the days to come. So that is like pumping in 30,000 megawatts of energy would not be an easy. It would totally disrupt the existing grid, and it is not a joke. So the planning is happening right now, and I'm sure within the next 4 to 5 years, our grids would be capable to transmit that kind of super energy into the mainstream. Talking about green hydrogen, again, GPCL is the nodal agency for the development of the green hydrogen hub in Gujarat. We had the Secretary MNRE, a wonderful host and a wonderful guide to us. Bhupinder Balla sir is guiding us in the way of how to go about it. As of now, what they've identified is about 5 green hydrogen hubs all over the country, out of which 3 are priorities, and 1 obviously is from Gujarat. The advantage of Gujarat is that, and Rajasthan, perhaps the nearby state, is the amount of wasteland that is available with us to create such kind of long and large-sized solar energy as well as wind hybrid energy parks. The wind study data also shows the most suitable sites are the run of Kutch for a hybrid park, as well as for offshore wind. It is again the coast of Bhavnagar, that is the Gulf of Khambat, that is again in Gujarat, and another site is the Dhanushkodi Tuticorin area of Tamil Nadu. So to bring down the levelized cost of hydrogen to $1 is like bustling the myth. We need to burst it soon. So listening to various conversations right from morning on about 70% of the entire power generation installed capacity being coal, the transition from coal to green energies and from green energies to nuclear and from nuclear to the next stage would be green hydrogen, which is a new buzz in town. So green hydrogen, all of us be wondering like it is a new buzz in town, the new boy in town. It is a disruption technology which is going to happen, which is going to slowly replace the oil and gas sector. Having said that, why green hydrogen? Because the levelized cost of hydrogen production has to be brought down to say $1, and as of now, as per discussion, so at least $2.33 per kg. The international market also defines green hydrogen a different way. The European Commission defines it a different way, and as of now, MNRE, Government of India, has defined it in a different way. So, going by those definitions, to bring down those costs, we need 4 things in place. One is the present cost of electricity at which we would be buying green energy power. The second is the most efficient electrolyzers and the most efficient electrolyzer technology that would be applying, be it PM or alkaline or any other technology. And third thing is storing those energy for the night hours or off-peak hours to split the water into production of hydrogen and eventually transport it into different forms. The next difficult process would be what do you do with those hydrogens? You have created a supply side, you have created a viable, efficient mode of production, and who's consumer use cases. So the government of India as well as the other governments have been focused on 3-4 particular areas. One is the steel sector, that is the production of green steel, which would anyway bring down the cost later. But we also need to find out who is going to buy the green steel, because any industry consuming steel will not pay extra for the steel being just green. So that is one challenge that we have. Second is the use case in the cement and clinker industry. Third use case is the obviously fertilizer industry. So a hydrogen hub can come in an existing place where an already prevailing ecosystem is in place. Gujarat has the triple advantage. Gujarat has one advantage of having an extensive wastelands where the green energy parks are already coming. We also have the port infrastructure already in place. The major 3 ports like the Kandla, Mundra and Dahej, where the proposed green hydrogen hubs are also coming. And the third, the places where you store hydrogen after the electrolysis process is done, the creation of storage godowns and bunkers. So bunkering, usage of hydrogen and the transportation of hydrogen would be the most 3 suitable factors that attract Gujarat as the most favored destination for production of hydrogen. In the mission to produce 5 million metric tons of green hydrogen, Gujarat initially started off with an ambitious plan of 1 million metric ton per annum. 1 million metric ton per annum by 2030. But of late, our Chief Minister was very happy that the ecosystem has become so good that Gujarat also aims to be producing 3 million metric tons per annum of green hydrogen. So that's talking about like 60% of the national ambitious roles right now. And we are sure by around 2030-35, we would be a very pivotal place where this ecosystem would take off. But for the system to take off, we also need to be reducing the cost of hydrogen, apart from disrupting the present oil and gas prices, which is obviously controlled by the OPEC and the Middle East countries. You would say, like, why Saudi Arabia is not doing green hydrogen? They are doing green hydrogen, say NEOM or NEL or even Japanese NEDO, they are all funding it there because they have a huge desert area where, solar ecosystems can come. Companies like Saudi Aramco may not be, very favorable of, disrupting this kind of technology. The only thing is they would look in for a newer technology. So, having said that, as of now, Gujarat has a very liberal wasteland allocation policy. We are also about to come up with a new hydrogen policy in about a month's time. We are in the final stages of drafting. So, having said that, all these ecosystems also involve some heavy investments. So the private companies, major about 5-6 huge corporates, are also involved in the designing of the industry, the pipelines, the truck ecosystems, the transportation ecosystems, and also have very ambitiously announced that they would be converting their transportation systems from present combustion engines to hydrogen-based combustion engines or hybrid fuel cell technology. So with the very recent Vibrant Gujarat Summit that was held, we had demonstrated that live demonstration technology, along with partners like Ashok Leyland, Toyota and Tata displaying their cars. You would be surprised that this $1 per hydrogen myth was also busted there, wherein we calculated the Toyota, it's called the Toyota Mirai, I guess the car. That's one of those cars which runs on a fuel stack hydrogen technology. It is 3 times more efficient and runs twice longer than the present diesel or electric cars that were tested. So based on the calculations, it was coming up to about 70 rupees per in kg or liter of hydrogen. But that technology leads much more advancements and reduction in cost of production. So I'm sure the research people, the policymakers are all working on this part, but I'm sure we'll be able to bust it off. Having said that, GPCL also works as a nodal agency for offshore wind, which has already been notified by the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy for Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu and Bhavnagar in Gujarat. So we are in advanced stages for the seabed leasing things, which would eventually be done by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. So I take this opportunity to invite all of you to visit those institutions and visit these kind of technologies, which would be soon a game changer. Gujarat already was said is a leading state in terms of energy production and is also an energy consumption state. So we are looking very advancedly and pushing it through the visionary leadership of the central government and the state governments. So your second part regarding solar rooftop, because I know I'm digressing from the topic of green hydrogen in energy transition, but I am being from the DISCOM side also.
we thought of taking an advantage from you.
Sure.
Because we have DISCOM sitting here also.
Sure, sir.
And the whole idea is, there is this overall view that, residential rooftop solar, why should it be pushed? Or rather, rooftop solar, why should it be pushed at all?
Yes.
Because you are essentially taking off the prompt paying customers, not the high paying, but the prompt paying customers, which is always a pain for the distribution company. But what we see in Gujarat DISCOM itself is pushing it.
Yes.
So the whole idea is, what is the thought behind it? And maybe we can capture that thought. And essentially now that the government of India has got a 1 crore target for residential rooftop, I think there's a lot of learning that can go from Gujarat to the other states.
So having heard to you patiently, I represent also the DISCOM, which is based out of Ahmedabad, the Northern Gujarat DISCOM, which is the UGVCL. So Gujarat happily happens to be the carrier of about 82% of the entire nation's solar rooftop as of now. So people, whenever we go to Delhi or whenever we attend such seminars, people tend to ask, why is Gujarat holding the 82% of solar rooftop, whereas no other DISCOM wants to push it? So the logical explanation would go a little bit behind. When solar was about very costly in India, so the decision to start off with a solar park entirely in India was because I represent the company GPCL, which did the first solar park in the country. So that was Charanka. So Charanka Solar Park was initiated during the visionary leadership of the former Chief Minister and the present Prime Minister. So that time, so the cost of solar was 15.6 rupees. So everybody told, who's going to buy the power? And the one thing which was told is the Gujarat citizen is ready to buy this power. That is what it was foretold. But I know it was very difficult to roll it out. But sir, if you see the fruits of those things, today Gujarat is buying or selling solar power at 2.23 rupees. It has come down well below 3 rupees of PM Kusum also. So that is the initial golden story which led to the success of solar. Secondly, after the success of Charanka Solar Park, we went on to do the Raganesada 1000 megawatt solar park. So that again, GPCL was so successful in that decisions. Of course, it had a political backing in the sense because it cannot happen without leadership. So the state government went ahead with that. After which we saw the vendors and developers who were actually forthcoming to put up their plants in terms of say 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 3 megawatts, say 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, standalone projects all over the state, wherever they had farmlands or wastelands. So they would just happily go, and now you can see of that 82% solar rooftop people, about 12% of the producers of electricity have become prosumers instead of consumers. So I've spoken to farmers who earn 4 lakh rupees, 5 lakh rupees on net metering by selling power to the DISCOMs rather than consuming those electricity. So now you would say, why is it viable for a DISCOM? It would not be viable for a general dispensation of a DISCOM. So having said that, DISCOM, I'm sure like in every state also involves in purchase of power based on your demand for your residential customers and based on your industrial customers. The story in Gujarat is like the southern DISCOM DGVCL, the revenue from electricity supply, 70% is, that is what the DGVCL, the Surat-based DISCOM, 70% of the revenue comes from industrial base. And the remaining 30% comes from agriculture, farmers and residential connections. The DISCOM which I had in Ahmedabad, so it is say about 40% revenue comes from the industrial base. That is the Ahmedabad, Sanand industrial area and little bit of areas of Mehsana and Gandhinagar. So the northern part of Gujarat is having obviously the farmers and the residential rooftops. So I was also talking to the power exchange director who was sitting with me in the morning. I'm not sure whether he was convinced with my argument, but then over in Gujarat the model is that GUVNL, you must be aware, is the power purchaser initially. So the power purchase is done for all the 4 DISCOMs by GUVNL and the cost is distributed amongst all the 4. So we have a collection efficiency and billing efficiency of say 94 to 99%. So in terms of March, we talk about 99% and the rest of the year is 93%. So the consumers are also very proactive in paying their bills on time. So we don't have to run behind them. So we have a very efficient collection system for that. Once you have your collection system in place, you are ready with a database of which are the residential customers whom you can target. And you can also ask them that would you want to go for this option? Whether you want to produce electricity or whether you want to consume electricity or whether you want to produce electricity. So this was done with the help of JEDA, which is the Gujarat Energy Development Agency. So what happened was we calculated the cost of power purchase for all the 4 discoms combined. And you know, in the exchange as well as from the private power purchases, that accounts for about 40% of the entire power purchase of the state. So that was coming to, for example, if you take a figure of say 8,000 crores, for example. So the cost of installation of solar rooftop on those people and paying them the money after the installation of subsidies was coming up to about 2,400 crores. So 2,400 crores is the money that we are paying to those customers after the installation of solar rooftop, whereas the money involved in power purchase were about 8,000 crores. So when you reduce this, it's about say 8,000 minus another 2,400. So that comes to about 5,600 crores. So the cost of power purchase gets reduced eventually. So which has already been socialized with the customer. So the power demand which was coming from the consumers, from the residential consumers, was reduced. And we were starting paying to them and for that. And you also know the cost of power purchase on a coal-based or a lignite-based would also have its charges and fuel adjustment cost and FFTPA charges involved in that. Whereas if it is solar daytime power, it's going to be like 3 rupees or 2 rupees 80 paise. So that is where we are winning the case-to-case basis. And the overall purchase cost is going to be less, whereas our the cost of paying to the consumer on solar rooftop is going to be much lesser than to the purchase cost of that. So that economics works, and of course it is Gujarat, so it's a business state. People look at it at like, I put my money here, I get back my money in about say 5 years, and the remaining 20 years I'm going to earn profit out of it. So that business acumen of the citizen helped push the solar rooftop flourish. But yes, the discoms may not have recovered the 100% money which we've invested in that. But of course, we are learning to invest. So that is where our purchase of power cost would go less, and our consumer base would be expanding. And with the launch of the 1 crore solar rooftop scheme a month back by the Honorable Prime Minister, we've already started registering. We've registered another 80,000 in about 1.5 weeks. So people are very happy doing that in Gujarat. So that's it from my side, sir. I would not take further time because I've got another speaker to be that. I hope I would be able to do justice to the given time. Thank you so much.
So always they say, in Gujarat, even a bureaucrat is a businessman. And so are politicians. So anyway, the last speaker in our panel is from Adani. Adani is practically into everything, everybody knows about it. Into generation, transmission, distribution, infra, port, gas, and so on and so forth, defense, everything. But since this particular session is about hydrogen, I would like also Adani to think about, we are talking about big targets on hydrogen and everybody is quite optimistic about hydrogen. What are your views on it? And essentially, one particular application of hydrogen is to co-fire with natural gas lines itself. And Adani happens to have the CGD license for a variety of cities. And Gujarat is, I think, got the biggest gas grid today in India. So are you also thinking about essentially co-injecting the natural gas and hydrogen together and essentially look at that particular market segment which goes to the industries as well as the residential consumers? Over to you.
So I also have a small presentation to make where I'll cover these points in just 5 minutes. I don't have much points anyway. The curse of being the last speaker, yeah, most of the speakers have covered my points in a better manner anyway. So I'll just quickly I'll just quickly cover 4 data points to showcase why green hydrogen will be an important part of net zero future. So the first one is this one. Currently, most of the green hydrogen is being used in the feedstock sector. Basically, it's part of a chemical equation. So it's used as ammonia, methanol, direct reduction of iron, refining, and most of it is generated by fossil fuels. But yeah, but yeah. So, but if you look at the net zero future, you would realize that the number of applications of green hydrogen has increased quite a lot. It makes sense to use green hydrogen as an energy carrier, and green hydrogen now has 14% projected share in the net zero scenario. So the first learning from here, as you know, just building on what Chintan sir mentioned, was that there is a need to look into new business cases, new use cases, one of them being co-firing it or blending it in our CGD network. And also, we are looking at some of the very interesting business cases like co-firing it with coal plants to reduce the emissions there, and also to reduce our dependence on imported coal, especially co-firing in imported coal plants. And one more lesson which we can gain from here is that hydrogen in itself is a very low density product. So it makes all the sense to focus on the various derivatives of hydrogen. So I'll quickly go to the next point. So just putting some figures to what people have been speaking on how green hydrogen cost will reduce over the time, and in the medium term, basically 2030, how we are looking at reduction of green hydrogen cost. So if you look at this picture, if you look at this graph, so the capex cost of the electrolyzer and the plant, the green hydrogen production plant, is around about 20 to 25%. The major chunk of green hydrogen production right now is electricity. So cheap electricity is a basic requirement of green hydrogen production. Then there's O&M water, because we need desalinated water, very pure water, for increasing the yield of green hydrogen production. There are four levers with us. One is capex cost, utilization. Both of these are on the capital cost side, and then on the operating cost side, the efficiency of the electrolyzer and the power cost. So just trying to look at here we are. So if you look at this graph, in next 7 to 8 years, the first lever, basically reduction of cost of electrolyzers, is something which will yield us around 0.3 to 0.5 cent of a downside on current cost of hydrogen. That will come due to scale up, automation and technology improvement in electrolyzers. The other thing is, as the utilization of electrolyzers increase due to cheaper cost of storage, cheaper cost of renewables, that will also spread the capex component over a much higher yield, bringing down the cost further. And electricity tariff reduction, as sir mentioned, 1 rupee is in sight in near future. So even if we take around like 1.5 rupees, there's a significant reduction. So will easily be around $1.3 to $1.7 per kg in next 5 to 7 years. Now, one important statistic here, basically how green hydrogen is related to food security and how it goes much beyond energy security. So India's fertilizer sector is heavily dependent on imports. There are three components to it. One is we make ammonia from gas, natural gas, and then convert it into fertilizer. 80% of that ammonia is imported. We also import ammonia directly from developed nations, and we also import urea directly. So in the last 2 years, if you see, due to the supply chain volatility, our fertilizer bill basically ballooned from 0.73 lakh crore to 1.75 lakh crore, almost 0.7% of GDP in just 4 years. If we have a domestic source of green ammonia, this sort of a food security situation can be mitigated. Here's a graph which shows that even if when the renewable energy goes down to $20 per megawatt hour, which is around 1.5 rupees per unit, the green ammonia which we can produce here will be much more competitive, will be more competitive than the imported gas. So that basically implies that green hydrogen can solve the food security issue as well. And one last point, trade of green hydrogen is going to be a big part of our hydrogen roadmap. Just looking at how some of the developed regions of world are defining green hydrogen gives us some cue into how we will need to build our plants. So if you see, this is the EU regulation. It calls for temporal correlation. It will give you an option of monthly banking till 2029. But after that, you'll have to match the production of hydrogen and consumption of electricity on an hourly level. The other thing is, there has to be additionality. You can only use newer plants built specifically for producing green hydrogen for this purpose. Sorry? You'll only have to use newer plants, yeah. So, which means that, things like taking electricity from the exchange when the prices are down, or taking RECs or energy attribute certificates might be a bit tricky situation if we were to export green hydrogen. Looking at US is much more stringent in terms of temporal correlation. They have annual till 2027 and hourly starting from 2028. And similarly, additionality constraint is there of 36 months. What they have done is they have segregated green hydrogen emission into...
Bhuvan, you have written the clean hydrogen. Is it green hydrogen or clean hydrogen?
So, if you look at this one, the carbon footprint of clean hydrogen has been mentioned as 0.45 to 4 kg CO2. So basically it gives us, US regulations gives some leeway to produce blue hydrogen as well within these regulations. Very quickly, just comparing all of this with what Indian regulations are. So two major things which come out of here is that additionality is going to be a huge thing. So basically, if you are planning to export green hydrogen, green ammonia, then you'll have to ensure that using the grid or using the markets to buy power when the prices are low, or using RECs to greenify your power might not cut through. The other thing is temporal matching. So if I had to basically match my generation with my production of green hydrogen, that would basically mean down the line I'll have to build plants co-located with the green hydrogen facility. So these are the learnings these are the 4 data points which I wanted to show, and yeah, that's about it.
Thanks, Bhuvan. Question. We saw a slide, someone showed us a slide of a steel plant in Orissa this afternoon. So what you're telling me is he then should set up a green hydrogen plant next to his existing plant, steel plant, so that he's able to then comply with the European standards. Is that what you're telling me?
That may be
a solution for them, because they can't get out of the steel business, they can't shift the plant. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So I think we're coming to the end of the session. I think we had a very interesting discussion, right from the space to the land and also rooftop solar. I think again a great applaud for Harry to putting all these things together and having this event every year. We did miss out when it got cancelled last time because of torrential rains over here, and it's good that it is happening now. So, over and all to you too, Harry.
Thank you, sir. Yes, 3 days of all kinds of stuff, brainstorming, new ideas, innovations, excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the most exciting part of the conference, the end. Someone said all good things come to an end. I say all things come to an end. But there's some more excitement for you guys. Upstairs in the sit-out, we have a comedian who's going to make you laugh. And then we have the award ceremony. And my friend Gulrez tells me the award ceremony starts... you got to be there in 25 minutes. So I'm not going to say goodbye now. I'm going to say goodbye then. Over to the upper deck. See you there. Thank you.